Thank you all for coming to our first budget meeting tonight. I would like to call the budget meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. and ask Claudia, our recorder, to take roll call.
Councillor Cunningham.
Here.
Committee Member Frost.
Here.
Councillor Tukolsky.
Present.
Committee Member Bolden.
Here.
Committee Member Ernst. Councillor Chenoweth.
Present and accounted.
Committee Member Councillor Geary.
Good evening.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Here.
Council President Peralta.
Here.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Committee Member Watney.
Present.
Committee Member Maxfield.
Here.
Committee Member Mason and Councillor Payne are absent this evening, and Mayor Morris.
Here. Thank you, Claudia. So before we get going in our meeting, what I would like to do is have us go around and introduce ourselves. And if you're a committee member, just say who you work for or worked for, possibly something so that the citizens kind of get an idea who we all are. And some of you are new, so we each can learn who each other is. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our city attorney, who just probably took a bite. I apologize.
I finished it, thank you.
Okay.
I'm David Leitenberg, I am the city attorney.
Jeff Towery, city manager.
Scott Cunningham, city councilor, and this is my third budget session.
Stephanie Frost. This is my first budget session. I also work for the McMinnville School District.
Sal Peralta, council president.
Lonnie Watney, I'm third budget, and I worked for 30 to 40 years as a director of finance and a financial controller in the hospitality industry.
Kim Morris, mayor.
Meredith Maxfield. I think this is my fourth or fifth budget, I'm not sure. And I am primarily a stay-at-home parent to 4 awesome kids, and I'm a graduate student.
Zach Geary, city councilor, and I think 6th. It's as many as you start to forget how many and you don't count anymore, so I think it's 6. And I'm a local business owner, general contractor.
Debbie Harmon Ferry, however many Meredith's been, I think it's the same. So 4th or 5th. And my day job is at Linfield University as an administrator.
Chris Chenoweth, McMinnville city councilor, and I'm a geek by trade. And 5th budget.
I'm Kelly Bolden. This is my first city budget, and I am disabled at this time, so I volunteer a lot, and I have history in government and public sector.
Dan Tukolsky, this is my first budget meeting. I am a city councilor, been a reserve police officer, and a planning commissioner for 4 years, so I'm also an engineer in my real life.
Great, thank you very much. And just for everybody that's here around the table, if you're new to our microphones, green is on, red is off, so make sure it's green when you're going to speak, and you have to get very close to it and directly into it to be heard. So just a reminder. If you're able to stand, please stand for the pledge, and I would like to ask Lonnie, since he says this is going to be his last budget, to lead us in the pledge.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Now it's time to select a chair. I'd like to call for nominations for chair of the City of McMinnville Budget Committee. Do I have any nominations?
Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to nominate Meredith Maxfield to our Chair of the Budget Committee.
Thank you. Do I? Okay.
It was a second.
Yep. Sorry. Do I have any other nominations? All right. So all those in favor, actually, Claudia, do you need to do the roll? Okay.
Counselor Cunningham?
Am I saying aye or Meredith? Aye, okay. Aye.
Committee Member Frost?
Aye.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Aye.
Committee Member Bolden?
Aye.
Committee Member Ernst? Oh, she's not here. Counselor Chenoweth?
Aye.
Committee Member Watney?
Agreed.
Counselor Geary?
Aye.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry?
Aye.
Council President Peralta?
Yes.
Committee Member Maxfield?
I'm going to abstain.
And Committee Member Maxfield has been elected by a vote of unanimously.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So the Chairman Maxfield will take over from here.
Thank you, Mayor Morris. Now, the next item on the agenda is an invitation for public testimony. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments on the proposed budget. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If we don't get to you tonight, additional opportunities for public testimony will be available during the budget meetings next Wednesday, May 21st, Thursday the 22nd, and if necessary, Friday, May 23rd. To ensure all voices are heard, we kindly request that individuals sign up to provide public comment on only one of these evenings. Public testimony received through the city website or emails will be added to the public record of the meeting. If you are on Zoom and wish to speak, please use the raise your hand feature or chat feature and send a chat to Claudia. Once your turn is up, we will announce your name and unmute your mic. To ensure fairness, we will alternate between participants who signed up in person and those who registered via Zoom. Please announce your name and the city you live in for the record. We will start with those who have pre-registered. Claudia, who do we have signed up for public comment?
Yes, before we start, I do want to state that we received several emailed written public comments. I've shared those with the entire budget committee, and those will be made part of the amended packet posted tomorrow. First, we'll start with Todd Butterfield.
I want to thank the Budget Committee, the Mayor, and the City Council for all of your hard volunteer work and dedication. We all love and care for McMinnville, and I'm sorry that we're facing major cuts to stay within budget, tightening your financial belt just like we residents have to do. To save a little bit of time, I'll reference Jeb Bladine's May 9th whatchamacallum in the News Register, which did a good job of summarizing the city's financial situation, and I agree with it, particularly the notion to sell RB rubber property for $4 or $5 million, not give it away, because we can't afford to do that. I understand the desire to improve Alpine Avenue, but our town's backbone is 3rd Street, and it should be a priority for improvements, beautification, and public safety. Psychologically, if 3rd Street looks good and is thriving, I think the rest of the town, plus visitors, investors, and others who want to grow our economy, feel good too. Regarding public safety, I ask that you maintain or increase the McMinnville Police Department, particularly law enforcement officers, reserve officers, and school safety officers. If our public safety degrades, it deters patrons to local businesses, costs local business in extra protection to their own property, and likely has sent a lot of potential entrepreneurs elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that we've already seen too many exits from 3rd Street as a result of crime and vagrancy. Visible crime in an area can reduce property value, which hurts the homeowner as well as the city's bottom line. Visible crime can reduce builders' incentive to build new housing. I've always had a good and quick response when I needed help from the McMinnville Police Department. But that was several years ago. From what I hear, we're not at the levels we used to be. So again, please keep or increase our local police force. Fewer officers makes the job much harder for the remaining officers, and I'm assuming that actually affects recruitment and retention as well. Fewer police will create added stress on our sheriff deputies. That's not good. No cut in any part of that department, please. We should not balance the budget by cutting from MAC-PD. We cannot afford to promote and prioritize a bond for the new rec center. Please focus instead on getting our existing library, aquatic center, and community center back in good working order. The sooner the better. No more kicking that can down the road. Finally, when times get better and you can again develop a rainy day or reserve fund, please make that amount obvious and clear in future monthly budget summaries rather than spending it down and then asking for help when it's already run out. That fund should be used for emergencies, not saving general operations. Let's live within our means. I know it's painful, but we should not solve the city's financial problems with new taxes or fees. No new taxes or fees. I understand that some city employees or services may be reduced at this time. That's usually the only way to solve these kinds of problems quickly. Even Microsoft just reduced their workforce by 6,000 employees worldwide. It's a thing that happens. God help you make the right decision in this tough time.
Thank you. Claudia?
Next, we have Lori Robertson.
State your name and what city you live in.
I'm Lori Robertson, and I live here in McMinnville. I don't really want to read this because I like to be more authentic than that. I am part of the McMinnville Economic Development Partnership Board. I also represent our community with the Willamette Workforce Partnership Chair for the High Performance Consortia, which is for manufacturing companies in Marion, Polk, Yamhill, and Lynn counties. And I'm extremely involved in our community economic development. I help the MEDP with their coffee startup club and encouraging entrepreneurs, and I personally own a business here in McMinnville. It's a machine shop, a CNC machine shop, female-owned, registered, and I'm in my 3rd year. I came to McMinnville because of the MEDP, and the fact, when I sat down with Heather in 2021, and she told me about the 4 pillars that the city leans on, and one of them being economic development, and what they do for new businesses, that's why I started my business here in the city of McMinnville. And to hear that $75,000, which is not a lot of money when you're talking about $3 million, that $75,000 is being taken away from the MEDP, and all that they do so much for the community. They've helped me personally. They've connected me with the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, and I'm not sure if you folks are aware, but we've had 4 meetings or 4 big events at Evergreen with the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, and I've brought to the table through the MEDP and the PNAA, Boeing, Lockheed Martin. We're in conversations with Jet Zero. They have the next up-and-coming plane. Big companies like that, they now know McMinnville exists, and we couldn't do that work without the MEDP. So please reconsider the $75,000 that's being cut from the MEDP, because they need that, and this city needs them. It seriously makes me reconsider if I want to stay here, because I'm about ready to bust at the seams, and I'm going to need a new building. I'm going to need a bigger building and more employees, and I want to stay in the city of McMinnville. And having the MEDP to support me is key to that. So thank you for your time. I understand this is hard, and I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mark Davis.
Good evening, Chair Maxfield, members of the Budget Committee. Mark Davis, live here in McMinnville. I'm a retired CPA, and I've probably attended at least 20 of these meetings over the years. Over the past 25 years, I have read about $1 million worth of reports and documents created by city consultants describing various paths to increase prosperity for the community. Despite all the reports and the honest attempts to implement some of these suggestions, it seems like every spring we gather at the budget hearing to figure out how to get by for another year. Factors mostly beyond our control, demographics, geography, economics, pandemics, the constantly changing direction of political winds, leave us scrambling just to get by. I think it is time to stop comparing ourselves to the wealthier communities and stop wishing our government services could be more like what they offer. Those consultant reports show that our median income is lower, and I believe our government service level has to reflect what the community can afford. If adding back 50 cents to the property tax rate this year, plus the usual 3% increase in assessed value, leads to a $3 million shortfall, it clearly indicates to me that the budget structure we have is not sustainable. I have suggested trying zero-based budgeting next year, but if you don't like that, please come up with some other plan to better live within our means. As I stated in my written remarks, I support adopting the FY26 budget as presented by the staff. They have clearly gone through an internal process to share the pain of the necessary cuts. I understand from listening to the council meeting on Tuesday evening that there will be an effort to find at least $150,000 in cuts to the proposed budget in order to fund the cost for holding a bond election to build a new pool and community center. I'm a bit mystified by this desire, given that one of the consultants I referred to earlier was a polling firm that noted declining support for the Culture, Parks, and Recreation bond measure. The measure proposed for the November 2025 ballot has now dropped improvements to the senior center, library, and parks, which directly contradicts earlier polling advice that said a bond measure with only the pool and community center would fail. I'm always sympathetic to the argument of letting the voters decide, but is it the wisest use of limited general fund resources to spend them on something we have already been told is unlikely to succeed? Thank you for considering what I have submitted for the hearing. I know everyone in this room wants to live in a welcoming and prosperous community. Obviously, there are different perspectives on how to achieve that. But I think the community benefits in the long run by an open and diverse dialogue about how to proceed. Best wishes to all of you in your deliberations. Thank you.
That's everyone that has signed up. We do, but no one has sent a public comment sign up.
Okay. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, everyone who shared your thoughts. It means a lot to us. We don't usually have this many people here, so this is fantastic. I had an inkling that I might be nominated tonight, so I wanted to share some opening remarks. You know, the possibility of facilitating this discussion has weighed heavily on me. None of us want reductions. The current economic climate and the rising cost of living have impacted people and institutions across the board, and the city of McMinnville is no exception, yet here we are. I want to begin by reminding everyone that we are all on the same team. While our priorities may differ, our shared goal remains the same, a forward-looking balanced budget. There are no absolute right or wrong answers here, just different approaches and perspectives. There is value and beauty in compromise and creativity, and I hope we lean into both. I'm operating under the assumption that everyone is here with the intent to be productive and to collaborate. I also want to emphasize that every voice matters in this conversation. Please do not hesitate to ask clarifying questions. Doing so helps everyone. At various points over the course of the meetings, I may ask each of you to weigh in or share your thoughts. Often this will happen at the end of our sessions. I just wanted to give you a heads up. There also may be moments when I pause the discussion to take a straw poll. We did that one time in the budget meeting last year, and I thought it was effective. This won't be a vote. It'll simply be a way to gauge whether we're ready to move on or continue with the discussion if continued discussion is warranted. So one completely hypothetical situation is is if someone is proposing further reducing the engineering department in order to fully staff the municipal court for more days each month. I don't want us to spend significant time on that proposal if only 1 or 2 people support it. So we would take a straw poll and then decide if it's split and we need further discussion or if we want to move on. So maybe we won't do any of those, but I just wanted to not catch you off guard. A few important reminders. I would like us to challenge ideas and not individuals. Avoid interruptions. Let's allow every person to be heard fully. Please speak into the microphone, as Mayor Morris has already reminded us. If you oppose a reduction and wish to reinstate something that was cut, eventually you'll need to propose how we maintain a balanced budget. Whether through additional reductions, resource reallocation, or identifying new revenue, we need to pass a balanced budget. I trust that each of us, has reviewed the budget thoroughly and reflected on your priorities. Thank you for doing the hard work. And thank you for the insightful questions you've already submitted, because that has saved us a lot of time. In case you didn't get a chance, they emailed out the second packet of Q&As. It was emailed out in the packet last night that we got, and then it's also posted online. A few final thoughts. I want to acknowledge and thank the city staff. It's clear that this proposed budget was built with great care, collaboration, and expertise, and we value and respect your work. Finally, thank you for all being here. I appreciate every one of the budget committee. We're all volunteers. None of us are paid. Community members who care deeply about McMinnville. And if this meeting becomes intense, it's because we're all passionate about living here and the people who live here. My hope is that by the end of this process, we all walk away feeling that we were heard, our questions were answered, and that while the decisions may be hard, we did our best in the service to our community. And I don't expect anyone to be happy, because no one wants to cut $3 million. But I believe we can be proud of how we approached it. Thank you. All right, moving on to the rest of the agenda. Thanks for letting me give that little speech. Does any committee member need to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest or recuse themselves? Yes, Councilor Geary?
Yes, thank you. I think at the beginning we mentioned how many times we've done the budget process, and so this will be my that many times time declaring. Potential conflict of interest. My wife works for the McMinnville Public Library in the children's room. It's a potential conflict of interest. I don't think it impacts my ability to weigh in on the budget, and so here's my time to disclose that.
Thank you. Sir?
I have one as well.
Okay.
As a reserve police officer, I am normally not paid. I have been paid over the last about a year and a half. I have one more report to finish, and then I will be resigning my position as a reserve officer. It's not a conflict of interest.
Okay. I'm going to ask the city attorney, is that suitable for, is there any ethical consideration?
Ultimately, the declaration of a conflict is up to the individual who declares it. There is personal responsibility and liability attached, and and with regard to that position, it has been my opinion, and I believe that of OGEC, that it involves an actual conflict of interest. How that is resolved is up to Councilor Tukolsky.
If I may comment on that, I've contacted the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. There is it's a possible potential conflict of interest which needed to be declared, which I've done, and it's not going to be an actual conflict of interest. So.
Okay.
Just to clarify, did you share the letter or their response with city attorney? Because
Sal, can you speak into the mic?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to check. Did you share the OGEC letter with the city attorney?
I have not, but I assume that liability, and I know exactly what it says, and that's on me.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to make one comment on the record, is I'm not understanding why nobody is questioning Zach's conflict of interest when his wife works and probably makes more money than a reserve officer, but we're questioning Counselor Tukalski. Can you explain that to me?
I don't know why individuals asked questions. I don't have a question. I'm just emphasizing that the responsibility of conflicts is up to individuals, and that I cannot advise those individuals. They accept that responsibility, and I understand that Councilor Tukalski has, and I understand that Councilor Geary has. I could give you more thoughts about conflicts of interest if...
No, I don't need that. It just seemed like there was a history here. It just seemed like when Dan said it, there was a concern, but there wasn't a concern when Zach said it. So is there more to this than I'm not aware of?
I have spoken with both counselors at different times about their conflicts. Both have discussed actual and potential conflicts with me at different times.
Okay. I'm just going to make another comment on the record that as mayor, if there's a conflict concern with a counselor, I think that I should be included in that as well. That's just my opinion. As the up here and all the levels, and the counselor and mayors are citizens, counselor, mayor, and then we have city manager. So if there was discussions, I would think that would be appropriate. Okay. So thank you very much. It sounds like there's no conflicts, and I appreciate that. I don't think there is either.
Thank you for that. If I may say, there were emails going back and forth, and it was very clear that both the city manager and the city attorney were in contact with me via those emails. So there was communication that took place that you weren't informed of.
Thank you.
I will turn the time over to Jeff Towery, the city manager, to present the budget message.
Thank you, Chair Maxfield, lay members of the Budget Committee, Mayor, and City Council. I missed part of the Mayor's direction earlier on introduction. I only know this because David Renshaw asked me a question before the meeting. This is my 41st municipal budget, so I started in middle school. Just be glad I don't read the budget message to you. There are city managers who present the budget by reading the whole budget message. I have a few opening comments for you tonight. Oh, the font looks different now. Fascinating. A few slides. Let me make a couple of opening comments just about process piece. Just a reminder, not so much for the folks around the U, but for the public in attendance and viewing. The Budget Committee essentially has three responsibilities: to approve a budget for council consideration, to set a property tax levy, and to take actions that require 8 votes. So a quorum of the committee is 8 votes, but due to a nuance in local budget law, it also requires 8 votes to pass any motion. So if there are 8 people here, you can have a meeting, but all 8 have to vote aye. Council's responsibility ultimately is to adopt the budget. The council may decrease any amount of appropriations, but may not increase any fund by more than 10%. The initial budget directions to staff were to maintain current levels of service. Those requests came in about $3 million more than available revenue. To set the stage, I've got some information from the League of Oregon Cities State of the Cities report. They issue that report every 2 years. So there's not a report that will come out until 2026. This is just a note about the number of cities that have seen increasing demands in service and concern about a decrease in the number of cities with approved financial capability. Do I just throw it on the ground, Claudia? Will that make it work? I have to point it at you? There we go. Thank you. Another finding from the report is that traditional revenue sources for cities are not keeping up with inflation. That's a story we've told here and that others have told as well. An update that not to the report, but an email that we received from the league earlier this spring. Over 2/3 of member cities, about 160 cities, are currently in financial cuts, and 1/3 are not financially healthy. This leads us to the goals that we established when we realized that our initial requests were more than our annual revenue. We wanted to set 3 goals. One is to bring annual expenses and revenues more in alignment, to make progress to meet the City Council's adopted reserve target, and to set aside resources for capital improvements to facilities. Our approach was really to focus on personnel services and materials and services so that we can better manage our ongoing or carrying costs. And while every department needed to reduce their requests, we did not direct across-the-board cuts. Reductions were assessed for service impacts and priorities based on our adopted core services, and reductions were ultimately roughly proportional to the department reliance on discretionary general fund revenues. We'll note that a number of jurisdictions have reported over the last couple of years that they're relying on increased fees, charges, and licenses. One of the quote before that's a little bit obscured is from the city of Coos Bay that talks about the challenges of maintaining aging facilities and the need to address those facility issues. This budget does not propose any new revenues. It only proposes revenues that have been established and authorized by the City Council. We can show that a couple of years ago, a majority of cities increased fees, charges, and licenses. Most cities were able to maintain their overall services and FTE. They were about half were maintaining their transportation infrastructure. Safety spending was about half. 84% saw increased operating expenses and employee wages, and they maintained contributions, employee contributions to health insurance for the most part. Talked a little bit about, we'll talk more tonight rather about the services that are being directly impacted. These are some of the services that the survey reported cities reducing or impacting 2 years ago. And you can see that they are across the board. There's a tiny footnote on the bottom that you can't read, it's obscured. The report also included references to some services that the city of McMinnville doesn't provide, fire service, social services, and water infrastructure. We've talked a lot about the drivers. These are the top 10 drivers for city costs across the state of Oregon. And they mirror the increases that the increasing cost drivers that we see. And you heard some earlier public testimony about our limited ability to impact some of these increases. Ultimately, because we focused on personnel reductions primarily through vacancies, about 82% of the personal services cost were a result of holding vacancies open. We also reduced a number of materials and services. There's a much reduced reliance on contracts for services, and we also recognize a lot of direct and significant impacts on outside partners. I'll note that this balanced budget was not easy to deliver. No one was happy doing the work this year, but I have a lot of pride and respect for the team that worked hard to pull this information together. We're going to transition to another couple of reports, although you see somebody leaning in as if there's a question. Councilor Chenoweth, can I answer a question for you?
Thank you so much. How is marijuana legalization a cost driver?
I thought that was the one thing on the list was sort of a surprise to me. I think it may be related to some communities that have either attempted moratoriums or more restrictive regulatory frameworks than other communities. McMinnville took a pretty light touch with a regulatory approach to marijuana facilities, so I'm not sure we would identify it as a cost driver for us, but it was the survey results from the responding cities that
we don't know. There's no real clear direction then on what that actually is.
No, it was not. And the report was really summary in nature. It didn't really dive into the details of these lists very much, so I'm not sure I can even answer that question, but it's a good one. I was curious about it as well. That really concludes my brief introductory remarks. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Berg, and then a subset of the executive team will be providing a continued presentation to you this evening.
Can I clarify something?
Yes,
10% change, was that the proposed budget, or how much, the 10% that we can only change? Is that after it's adopted, or?
So once the budget committee approves a budget, the council can only increase any fund by 10%.
Thank you for the clarification.
You could actually do more during the year, but you'd have to go through a supplemental budget process. You'd have to advertise and publish, and so that's just how you deal with what will be presented to you in June.
Thank you.
And that limitation is only upward, not downward.
You can reduce any expense.
We are going to hear from some of the departments on budget reductions. I'm going to ask that the members of the Budget Committee hold their questions until all the presentations are done. My understanding is that they won't be too long, so just make a note of your question and we'll come back to it. Thank you.
Good evening, Budget Committee and City Councilors and community. 10 years ago, the budget would come to the Budget Committee and be discussed and approved in one night with minimal input from the committee or the community. In the last few years, the budget process has expanded to 2 and 3 evenings, providing more time for discussion and engagement. This year, we've added another evening tonight, 1 week in advance of the next budget, to allow time for questions and options that come up to be further investigated by staff, and then we'll report back to you next week. The budget you have in front of you reflects the professional expertise and collaboration of the city executive team to bring you a balanced budget. It was not an easy or enjoyable task. Difficult decisions had to be made, and I know that there have been tears, frustration, and anxiety from many of us. These decisions affect the city and the community. We want collaborative input. This budget document is a launch point for your discussions. The scheduled budget meeting tonight and the next week are the opportunity for the Budget Committee and the community to discuss, question, and provide feedback for the final budget. We'll keep our presentation this evening under 30 minutes to allow a lot of time for you all to discuss.
Thank you, Jenny. With that in mind, with that understanding on the table, we are going to try and give you a general sense of the impacts across this proposed budget. And I'm going to start with some of our internally facing departments. They go a little quicker. We're talking city manager, city recorder, legal, HR, communications, and in just a moment you'll hear from Scott for IS and finance. With a few exceptions, including some noted on this slide, cuts within these budgets center around items that provide greater organizational efficiency and responsiveness, right? They are, in fact, internally facing. And because those things are non-concrete concepts, I imagine through the evening you're going to hear repeated references to efficiency. I was supposed to go off quietly to let me know. To efficiency, to responsiveness, to levels of service, I wanted to give you a quick and concrete example. I have a professional services legal line item in my budget. When we have a line like that, it involves a lot of unknowns for the next year. You can estimate generously or you can estimate cautiously. Of course, this budget comes with cautious estimates. When you have a generous line, you're inclined to reach out quickly for expertise. I pick up the phone quickly. I pick up the phone because I need expediency and expertise. When we do this carefully, I do more review. I'm more cautious. I do more legal research. Those are how those in-concrete concepts play out concretely.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks, Budget Committee. To continue discussing internal services cuts, a couple of our larger internal departments, IS and Finance, cut almost all travel and training expenses and tightened our belts as much as possible on materials and services and technology costs. and continue to evaluate all technology for cheaper options. Relying less on professional services to bolster work capacity and focusing more on cost and quality to balance budgets, these trade-offs are felt in the pace in which we deliver services to the community with reduced efficiency. Our work, for the most part, stays the same. We just invest less in infrastructure and training, items that have less tangible short-term impacts. Our internal services departments still serve the community via the external departments that we serve. Things just take a little longer. We have a little lower quality tools to do the job, and the community service delivery is subtly and unavoidably affected. In IS, we're not going to cut corners on core services software, but we'll reduce licensing in many places. We'll switch to free software where we can. We'll redeploy tools that provide baseline compliance. And for some of those items, same for the city recorder's office and HR, legal and communications, impacts are felt in increased risk of compliance issues, staff morale with decreased training opportunities, and those impacts are felt. They kind of just echo into the external departments that we serve in the community as well. And for the next slide, go ahead, as we start to segue from internal to external services, I'll take a moment to talk about the municipal court. As part of the initial reductions, one court clerk position was eliminated for a savings of about $102,000. The court had 4 FTE in 2024, went down to 2 and is now at 2.6, and staffing remains a challenge. This affects the community in many ways. There will potentially be less coverage for the front office of City Hall, reducing public access to court office hours. Staff will have less bandwidth to coordinate court services with other community organizations and also to monitor post-judgment defendants. Right now, compliance with state reporting is pretty challenging for the court and will only get more challenging to complete in a timely manner. And internally, for the court, running with reduced staff makes it more difficult for the court to collect fines, to operate efficiently in day-to-day tasks. And with all those workload challenges, the court software implementation has been delayed, and it's difficult to imagine a software implementation with the court staff at current levels. Moving into the next group, I'll hand it over to Heather Richards, our Community Development Director, to talk more about reductions, and Heather's joining us online there.
Thank you, Scott, and good evening, budget and committee members. So in the Community Development Department, we are funded through a variety of different sources. So I needed to look at those programs that are funded solely through the general fund and others that are supported by it. Our code compliance program is 100% supported by the general fund. So the recommendation is to reduce the code compliance program in half. We have 2 FTEs for that program. We've carried 2 FTEs for that program for at least 2 decades here in the city of McMinnville. We are recommending the removal of 1 FTE. That's a savings of $131,000, and then their assorted supportive services of about $19,000. The impact of that will be, obviously, there'll be a limited response to complaints. We won't be able to respond to as many complaints. We'll have to triage complaints that we do respond to. It will also eliminate our ability to support and administer a volunteer program for graffiti removal and for hardship homes that have a hard time cleaning up their yards. We have also matched up volunteers with those households. That will be eliminated as well. The internal impact is obviously it provides an increased staff workload to the remaining code compliance officer, and we're less responsive to other programs within the city for code compliance. So all the departments are calling our code compliance program to when there are code issues in play. The other program that we looked at, next slide, Claudia, the other program we looked at that has 100% general fund into it is 25% of our special projects manager. The special projects manager is funded primarily through grant funds. So 75% of that position is through grant funds and they're implementing projects. 25% of that position is dedicated to our legislative work. And with the recommendation to remove the contracts for the lobbyists at the state and federal level, we're also recommending removing that general fund portion of this position, so that would reduce it from a full-time position to a part-time position. The impact for that is the legislative advocacy has been successful. The last 3 years, we have been able to bring in about $3 million for local projects in the community of McMinnville, and we won't be able to put that type of effort behind it in the future. We are also recommending taking a quarter of our associate housing planner who's working on current planning and putting that position fully in the affordable housing fund, so it would be funded by that, and taking the quarter FTE out of the general fund. What that means is we're taking 520 hours off the books annually for current planning review. That's going to result in some delays in development review and more workload for our remaining staff. We don't have the ability to control the amount of development review that comes in, so we can't ratchet down. We can't ratchet the workload down to the reduced staffing, but we will work on efficiencies to be able to respond to that. And lastly, for engineering, it's a similar story. Engineering is also funded through a variety of different funding programs. So looking at where the general fund helps engineering, it was in supportive services, and there's a recommendation to reduce that by $100,000. The impact to that is similar to the impact for planning, so potential delays to capital project scoping and right-of-way acquisitions. That was some specialty consultants that we were looking to bring in to do that work for us. Potential minor delays to development review, and the delays in the city's ability to react to potential environmental assessments. Internally, it results in increased staff workload for the existing staff, and then staff review of disciplines outside of our expertise. So the existing staff will be working on things that will be stretching their expertise in terms of their review. And next, we're going to pass it on to Jenny with the library.
The library requires people, requires staff, it requires books. There were not really many options for us other than to look at staffing reductions. So you see those up here on the slide, and you've heard about them previously. And that basically, we had to reduce our hours in order to make those staffing cuts, which will also affect some of our programming and events that we offer. We also have already found that we need to step back from some opportunities. That's a tough one, but sometimes, you know, when you don't have the capacity, you can't take advantage of some opportunities. And we'll also just be spread a little bit more thin. And I appreciated Heather talking about the, stretching one's expertise, because that manager position takes care of a lot of things that we heavily rely on, and we will all be stretching our expertise. And that, of course, means maybe taking a little bit longer to manage those things that we have to take on.
I'm Susan Muir, the Parks and Recreation Director, and for Parks and Recreation, we publish a quarterly rec guide that gets mailed to every resident in McMinnville, and we have decided that one of the reductions would be to reduce that by 2/3. We're not sure exactly if that means we'll send one rec guide or if we'll do postcards. We're working on that plan now, but the impacts to that could be reduced community awareness about Parks and Recreation programs. We are fee driven, and so that would mean potentially a drop in revenue. So we will be interested to watch that as we go along. The other reduction that we made was something you've heard about earlier tonight, the Culture, Parks and Recreation bond work. There was $359,000 approved in this current year's budget, and to close the gap, we proposed stopping that work and putting that $359,000 in to help fill the budget shortfall. The reduction of that means that we would have no long-term plan for our aging facilities, and as many of you know, we're facing some closures. For example, the elevator at the community center, which is now going to be fixed, but we know that that's the next step for many of our features in our buildings. What that does internally is decreases morale of staff that has to work in these buildings, and then in addition, with the new general citywide facilities maintenance resources and public works, we will find ourselves pulling on that more and more. For park maintenance, this cut takes us back to where we were before the 23-24 budget was approved. So this means that we would be basically taking the acreage that we maintain in the standard level of care, which you saw during the Parks and Recreation Open Space Plan adoption, down to basic to save money. That means they're no longer irrigated, there's not as much asset protection happening, and we would generally see a reduction in the overall look of our parks, and we had made a lot of progress on this in the last couple of years, and so we would see that going back to where we were before that progress was made. And we do think that that impacts our community in a lot of ways. It's the aesthetics and the feeling of safety in our parks, which we work so hard to raise, and then there will be longer response times when issues do happen in the parks, like a broken piece of play equipment or something. We do support a number of volunteer projects, and that would be decreased as well, and then just overall preventative maintenance. And the same with some of the other areas, staff morale, staff workloads, and then what Public Works through Parks Maintenance, they support Parks and Rec programming. So the work that they do down at Joe Dancer helps support our programs that we run down at Joe Dancer. So that will decrease that support as well.
Don't know which one to use. Hi, I'm Cord Wood. I'm the McMinnville Chief of Police. I've been your Chief of Police for 4 months last week, and I didn't think that this is where I would find myself 4 months into to the new role, but here we are. So let's look at what reductions at the police department look like and what the potential impacts for those are. So policing's a very, very complicated and multifaceted profession, and one of the things that I applied to my thinking when I went through this process were some expectations that I share with my folks every year, and I shared that with my department in McMinnville when I first came in, and those things are things that applied to me and that I applied to myself during this process, that people are always more important than property, that quality is better than quantity, that competent law enforcement officers and administrative staff cannot be produced or created during the emergency, and that integrated and effective policing solutions require non-police partnerships and support. We had a big hill to climb, and unfortunately at the police department, I can't cut enough stuff to get to the point that we needed to be at. So we had to look to position reductions. You see those listed there on your screen. So the 3 patrol officer reductions that are listed, those are uniformed first responder positions. Those are the folks that when you call 911, they showed up in the uniform and the marked card to your house. The detective position is a specialty investigator position. They investigate major crimes, child abuse, sex abuse, complex criminal cases. That's what is assigned to that role. We have a middle school resource officer position. We have one administrative support position, and then correspondingly, those positions correspond to roughly about 11.5% of my sworn law enforcement staff. So the training, overtime, and other lines similar to those were reduced by about that percentage to the tune of about $137,000 for the coming budget cycle. So in addition, we looked at what can we reduce from our programs. Our reserve program, I need to prioritize funding full-time law enforcement officers. And so the reserve program was one of those things that I had to give up. We reduced overtime. We had to reduce the monies allocated for RV towing. So when we have an abandoned RV or RV that's impounded by the city as part of a camping process, those are the funds that we use to impound and dispose of those vehicles. It can be quite expensive because there's a lot of hazmats that go with those RVs and other vehicles. Reductions to uniforms, training fuel. We're foregoing some equipment replacement. We eliminated software as much as we could, and then facilities and maintenance were also on that list. Total in people and things come to about just a little over $1 million. So the impact, I think one of the more significant impacts, and that's why I listed it first, is the dedicated traffic enforcement. McMinnville hasn't had dedicated traffic enforcement officers for some time. And the first week that I met with the council, one of the things that I said that my number one priority was to fill the positions at the police department as quickly as possible with this in mind, because I can't have a meeting with a service organization, a coffee shop meeting, a conversation on the street corner without somebody asking me for additional traffic enforcement. I anticipate that we're going to see delayed response to non-emergency police calls. I also see that we will have a delayed response to emergency police calls because we will have to reduce the number of police that are on a shift at any one time. We're going to have to reduce the reception hours to the public. We're going to have to reduce our community policing programs. And we're going to have some internal impact as well. So McMinnville Police Department has been limping along with staffing for a long time. And we keep a light on at the end of the tunnel with our staff that we're going to get these positions hired, we're going to get back to full staffing, and then this, you're going to work fewer hours, you're going to have more time at home, you're going to have a better work-life balance. This is going to make that more difficult because I'm going to have to readjust what that looks like. It's going to be difficult with the recruitment and retention and succession planning too, because every time I lose an individual to another city, another location, I start back over at the bottom with my experience, my development, and my succession planning for the future. It makes it more difficult to get people to look at McMinnville as the place they want to come be a police officer. Staffing comparison, just for a little insight. So this rollback will roll McMinnville Police Department back to approximately 2015 staffing levels. I'll have one more sworn police officer position than the police department had in 2015. What it won't have, great timing. Some of the things that we had in 2015 that are no longer part of the department, we no longer have a dedicated narcotics detective. We don't have the park ranger program anymore. We don't have the community support coordinator that helped facilitate and support many of our community policing functions. And then code enforcement, which was part of the police department in 2015, is now part of community development. The one thing that you would see on an org chart from 2025 that you didn't see in 2015 is we've added a rank of corporal to try and develop people for future leadership positions. But officer for officer, it's basically 2015 staffing that we'll be going back to. And we talked about this a little bit. So in 2024, calendar year 2024, 28% of the total patrol shifts at McMinnville Police Department were staffed on overtime, 209 shifts. That doesn't count the list that's on the right-hand side of your slide, because all of those things are overtime realities too. And for example, we had one of these days exactly yesterday. We had two officers who were night shift officers who had to go to court all day. We had one officer call in sick, and so to get to minimum staffing, we had to order someone in, we had to hold people over, and then about an hour or so into that first hour of the night shift, we had a pretty significant incident where we had a vehicle pursuit go through town from another agency, and suddenly many of those other things kick in where a 12-hour shift now turns into 14. And this is creating a tremendous amount of stress on the staff. And losing these positions is going to continue, if not increase it. So we're going to have to find new and innovative ways to help alleviate some of that, and those things, there's some things in progress, but there's only so much that we can alleviate. We'll continue to try and balance public safety needs with our workforce sustainability, but this is going to have an impact on us.
So, excuse me. So obviously, there's options that are available to the Budget Committee that we considered it as an executive team, but we did not put into the proposed budget. We looked at further program reductions, but felt that the further cuts were going to be severely impacting some of our services. We looked at facility closures and felt that they were highly disruptive for pretty minimal savings at this time in most cases. We talked about an additional personnel reductions of about 7 or 8 positions. But we decided to focus on the unfunded vacancies and reducing hours and services so we could provide that staff stability and organizational stability, with our staff being our highest value resource as an agency. And then finally, we also looked at the general services COLA removal, and we felt that was short-term savings with some potentially high long-term downsides that included recruitment challenges, costs due to turnover, and employee morale.
So I'll wrap this up, and then we'll turn it over to the committee for Q&A and discussion. We wanted to sort of highlight the process that you have in front of you tonight. The proposed budget has been in your hands for a couple of weeks now. You're starting your questions and deliberations tonight. We'll be doing our best to support you in answering questions and pursuing options and alternatives. We'll all be taking notes. I'll let you know that for the items that start to seem to gain traction or consensus for changes to the budget, Crystal is going to be keeping track of those, and we're hoping that next week we'll have sort of a live spreadsheet that we can actually put up on the board for you. But to sort of build that and not knowing where the conversation is going to go, we'll do our best to keep track of that information and then try to build that tool for the subsequent budget meetings. Just also in terms of process, you've got all the general fund folks here. We'll encourage you to focus on the general fund, the reductions that we've talked about, questions about those, service impacts, wherever you want to go with the general fund tonight. We'll do our best to answer questions, but one of the reasons we've scheduled this meeting a week in advance is the expectation that you're going to need some time to sit with this budget. Even having read through it, you haven't had the benefit of the Q&A with your colleagues, and you may be asking us information that it's easier to turn around in a week than it is in a night. So we wanted to create some space for you to both think about and have some opportunities for consideration, but also whatever direction you give us in terms of more information or different perspectives, we've got some time to bring that back to you. We did mention the Q&A. There's about a dozen questions that we still are working on that will be presented to you at a subsequent meeting. Just in terms of closure, just a reminder that the staffing reductions that we've talked about totaled about $1.5 million. The program and other service reductions is about $1.4 million. This budget does meet the council's approved operating reserve target of 2 months, and it does set aside a capital reserve of $1 million for future facilities improvements. With that, we thank you for your attention, we thank you for your support, and we look forward to some robust Q&A and discussion for the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we will begin the fun part. Q&A is going to be focused on the general fund, reductions, and service implications. Who would like to begin with the question or comment?
I'll throw out a question here.
Mr. Cunningham?
And Chief Wood, the slide that you had up there had the patrol officers, the detective, the SRO, and the support staff. And next to each one of them, I think I understood, and from being on this committee, specifically the patrol officer, those were the unfortunately, kind of the long-term vacancies that we've had, correct?
Yes, so the date next to those positions on the slide was the last time that that position was actually occupied.
Okay, okay, and so in that particular slide, then the support specialist, that's somebody who we currently have on staff, or they are also not currently on staff?
That's a position that was vacated this year after
Okay,
I
okay.
came.
Okay, yeah, that was just the clarification I needed. Thank you.
Counselor Chenoweth?
While you're there, thank you.
Almost made it.
Huh?
Almost made it.
Well, since we got you there, I'll ask, I think the primary, maybe the only question I have for you. Yeah, my mic is on, but my mouth isn't close enough. I'm taking lessons from Sal. So I'm not understanding something you said, and so I'm just trying to help my thinking on this. I see the reserve program as a way to cheaply get a couple of officers or more, depending on how many reserves we have, in cars and out on the street. A lot cheaper than it would be if we were paying for regular officers. So I'm failing to understand why we would want to get rid of that program, since it's relatively cheap and keeps a couple officers out there, when we're cutting other staffing cars, and we need the cars out there. We need the police officers in seats out there.
So my thinking on that is we do have low participation. The people who do participate in our program are great, and I appreciate everything they bring to us, and they bring it to us mostly out of the goodness in their heart and wanting to be part of the community and find a way to chip into it. When I first started in law enforcement, reserve programs were often the gateway into law enforcement because it was a different time, and hiring police officers was much less difficult than it is today. I remember when I went and took my test to be a police officer, even with my reserve experience, I got to test with 1,100 of my closest friends, and those days, unfortunately, are no longer here. Facing the difficult decisions that we have, I prioritized full-time regular police officers because they can be scheduled, they can be deployed on a regular basis in ways that reserve officers often cannot. And the money that was attached to that program, while small, also allows me to pay for overtime dollars for full-time regular law enforcement officers that I wouldn't otherwise have. It allows me to maintain training dollars that I wouldn't already have or might not have for full-time regular law enforcement employees.
I'm not sure I'm satisfied with that answer, but I'll accept it. Thank you.
Committee Member Bolden, I think I saw you next.
I just have a further question on, not the reserve program, but with the vacant positions. Does the budget include the operational equipment, vehicles, and so forth that are needed to outfit those vacant positions, or has that also been removed?
So I think I understand what you're saying. So there were similar reductions in other lines of the budget to correspond with the number of positions that were being reduced from the staff. So overtime, training, uniforms, other things that are there to support the position were similarly reduced as part of the process.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Yes, thank you. Chief Wood, thank you for being here. I would just like to clarify for the public, the SRO position, the school resource officer, there was one at the police department, correct?
The department currently has 2 authorized positions for SRO, one for the high school and one for the middle school. So this would reduce the FTE by eliminating the position to support the middle school. There would still be a position remaining that was focused towards the high school.
Okay.
If I understood what you were asking.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because we've only had one SRO within the school district over the last calendar
Yeah,
year.
the date on the slide was the last time that we had SRO assigned to that middle school SRO position.
Okay, so we've only had one officer assigned to the high school, and the middle schools and elementaries are not assigned.
The elementary school does not have a dedicated SRO position.
Yes.
Only the two other, well, the high school and the middle schools.
Okay, so the middle schools would essentially be unpoliced at that time.
They would not have an assigned SRO, that's correct. Those calls for service that would come from the school would then be sent to your general service patrol staff, so it would reduce the person on the street. And I think the other thing that it reduces too, it reduces our access to kids and our ability to keep kids safe from just that interaction with them. You know, it's hard to quantify, and it's hard to put a dollar figure on or a value on, but it is very valuable.
Thank you.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry?
As long as you're here, we may as well keep going. First, thanks to all of you. That was very helpful, just to get my mind around things. I just need to clarify. So basically, I think if I'm reading the slide right, we would be down 8 positions from what we would like to have for appropriate staffing, but we would only be down 1 position from the current levels that were staffed last year. Is that accurate?
Let's see if I can. I am currently down 8 positions from not talking about the reductions that are a part of the coming budget. I have currently got 8 vacant positions in patrol, or I'm sorry, sworn law enforcement police officer positions, let's say that, okay? And then I have 1 vacant administrative position as well. These reductions would take 5 of those 8 positions away, leaving 3 current vacancies after July 1. Does that answer your question?
I think that helps me. Thank you. Yes. And then one other question. Have we looked at or considered other ways to deal with traffic than necessarily officers, like cameras or speed reader signs, whatever those are called? Have we done any looking into any of that that could offset not having enough traffic patrol?
So we have looked at innovating different ways, and I spoke about this a little bit, gave a preview a little bit about this at the council meeting on Tuesday, of a little different approach to traffic enforcement within the city. I don't know that it will necessarily create additional traffic enforcement. It may create more meaningful traffic enforcement. We're looking at ways to address the top 10 traffic crash locations within the city and the violations at those locations that contribute to those collisions. We're in the infant stages of rolling that out right now, and working with YCOM, who is the best keeper of that data for us to mine to figure out what the appropriate locations are and maybe when to be there. So will that result in more traffic enforcement? I won't venture out on a limb to say it'll result in more. May it result in more meaningful traffic enforcement? Potentially.
Thank you.
Councilor Geary, and then we'll go to Mayor Morse.
Nothing for me at the moment, thank you.
Mayor Morse? Okay.
Hi. So when it comes to the reserve, are we eliminating it or just unfunding it?
So the $30,000 that is attached to the reserve program that was on the slide, and it's not that slide, it's actually, there we go. The reduction that's on that program, those monies go to recruit, train, equip, new reserve police officers. So what it gives me is the ability to train and equip people. So people who were currently part of the program could potentially remain in the program until I had to replace a major piece of equipment. And then I would have to reevaluate my ability to keep the program moving forward.
Okay, so we would have the reserve, but right now we don't have any money to buy supplies or to pay for training for them. But
Yes.
can come back. It can come back in the future if we find money.
It could.
Okay.
It certainly could.
You said there were 2 reserves. I believe one of those is also our bailiff.
Correct.
Is that out of the court fund or out of your fund?
The bailiff does not come out of my fund. There's some extra help dollars that come out of my fund that are funded with salary savings from vacancies. So it's kind of bifurcated his position.
And the SRO is half funded by the school district?
I don't know if it's exactly a half split, that there are revenues attached to.
Our school district person says, yes, it is.
It's half the cost during the school year.
Okay.
So it nets to a little less than half of the FTE.
That's much better description than I was going to be able to give it.
And I know there's been talk about that this would not reduce what currently is there. It would reduce vacancies that we would like to fill. And I just want to make a comment to that they're there and they're not filled, but that means the ones that are on duty are working a significant amount of time to make up that difference. And a lot of time, overtime is more expensive than straight time. And it also is a bigger pull on a job that is so stressful to start with. So that's a comment, not necessarily looking for an answer. It's concerning to me.
I wouldn't say that they're even making up the difference. They're keeping us afloat, right? Those are police officers that you're not seeing in your community. And we do our best to keep as many of those folks available in the community as we can to provide as much service as we can. But I wouldn't say that you're, under the current way of doing this, seeing the full benefit of those positions in the community.
So not filling those vacancies, we're still not going to have traffic as you had hoped. We may reduce service levels, our numbers on shift. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
could happen.
And I know another big thing that we did, I'm sorry. You're good. This is my last one, is we have a lot of trespass. We have a lot of downtown that you're called on. Will that affect those calls, do you believe?
I don't see how it could not.
Thank you.
Mayor Morris, I had a question. If I may. Excuse me.
I think I have a few
Chairman
ahead of
Field.
you. Sorry.
Forget mine.
You're okay?
Yeah, I don't have any.
Oh, okay. Debbie, or sorry, Committee Member Harmon Ferry?
So I just want to clarify, those positions that have been vacant since 2022, why are they vacant? Is it because no one's applying? Is it because we can't find qualified people? Has it been the budget the whole time? Why have they been vacant for 3 years?
I think it's a host of reasons. I don't think you can boil it down to just one thing. We're not the only law enforcement agency in the United States who's having a difficult time recruiting now. Some are having a greater difficulty recruiting than others. I think that our staffing vacancies are higher than other agencies, but they're lower than other agencies. So I don't know how, I don't think you can boil it down to just one factor of why.
But we haven't been turning folks away. It's just we're not getting the applicants we need.
No, I will absolutely turn somebody away if I don't think they're a qualified candidate that should be out there policing the community of McMinnville. We have standards, and they're good standards, and they're there for a purpose. So if somebody doesn't meet the standards or qualifications to go out and carry a firearm in this community and make decisions that affect people's lives in the fashion that I expect, we won't hire that person.
Chair, can I just add a partial response? None of those vacancies are intentionally held open. We've never chosen not to hire when we had a qualified candidate if there was a vacancy.
And I apologize if I didn't get that from the question you asked.
Counselor Tukolsky?
Yes, thank you. Chief Wood, do you know what your overtime costs were last year?
From 2025 or 2024, I could look that up for you to date, but I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay. City Manager Towery, during our one-on-one, I asked for that number, but I haven't received it. Were you able to find it?
I think we're still working to answer that question.
Okay. I'd like to have an answer before we attend the next budget meeting.
Yeah, and you'd actually ask for overtime for all departments, so we're pulling that information
Absolutely.
together, yes.
Yes, thank you for that. So Chief Wood, a few more questions. The minimums right now that you have on staff are 4 people, policing 4 police officers and usually 1 sergeant, 4 minimum, policing a city of 36,000 people. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Do you have intention to reduce the minimums on each squad?
I'm going to have to probably reevaluate how we deploy, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet, based on a number of factors, but I think we're going to have to reimagine how we deploy officers on a shift, and we may have to find ways that we can have more officers on during our busiest call for service hours and fewer on during our less busy call for service hours. But I don't have a solid solution for how we're going to deploy moving forward.
Okay. The reason I ask is I've been on a traffic stop before where I've asked for cover. I had an angry transient that had crashed a vehicle, and there was 0 cover available. So I was left on my own. So that concerns me, so thanks for that. One other question I had was the special units that oftentimes help for recruitment. Let's say the motor units, some kind of a rapid response unit, K9. Are we maintaining those? Are we adding to those? Are we able to maintain any of those?
Well, like I said during the presentation, the dedicated traffic enforcement that I would like to have out there, people whose assignment is nothing but traffic enforcement and motor vehicle collision investigation, I'm not going to be able to do that. It's going to have to remain as it is at the moment, where officers are going to have to do traffic enforcement as they can find time to do that. They'll be dispatched to motor vehicle collisions in the same fashion that they currently are, like other calls for service. So having that resource would not only, in my opinion, increase traffic safety in the community, and we're at a time in McMinnville where both motor vehicle collisions and motor vehicle collisions are on the increase and have been for the last 4 or 5 years. So having that resource would, in my opinion, help alleviate some of those issues that we're seeing, and it would also take those responsibilities away from general patrol officers to go out and do other enforcement activities.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Committee Member Frost? Oh, Counselor Peralta? Sorry, you're just like perfectly
I know, I'm sorry.
parallel.
That's
Fine, thank you.
Like-
Thank you, Chief Wood. I really appreciate your presentation. I have a question that relates to the presentation, but it's actually just a technical question on page 74 of the report, and this might be for other staff. This is a table that is the 5-year staffing trend for, in terms of what we budgeted. And my question relates to the 2 columns at the end. There's a proposed 2025-26 column and then a second proposed 2025-26 column. And is the first column the initial number or the service level number, and then the second column is what we're actually...
Sal, can you, there's yet the one on the screen, but then there's the actual page number, and the page number doesn't match up with 74.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, sorry. It's page 70 in the hard copy packet.
Page 74 of the PDF.
Luddites. My colleagues are Luddites.
74.
Sorry, Sal, did you, or Councilor Peralta, did you ask your question?
I prefer Sal. I did ask the question. It was just to get a clarification on the two columns. I think that the column, the second to the last column, I think is the service level budget, and then the next column over is the proposed budget, but they both say, it's a little confusing to me. And it's germane here because it's a significant difference in positions.
So the column on the far right is what's in the proposed budget document as funded.
Okay.
So you actually see the reductions in that. So the reductions that we've talked about are in that far right column.
And then the next column to that is what?
Crystal, help me out with that.
So the authorized proposed are ones that are not eliminated. They're authorized, they're just unfunded.
Does that help?
So it's showing,
Got it. So we've authorized it, another 6 positions, but we're not funding those 6 positions.
we're authorizing 182.18 FTE,
Got it.
but showing that then 8 of those are unfunded.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that.
So is the purpose of that because it's easier to then hire those authorized positions because they aren't completely, why do we have the distinction?
So authorizing the position but not funding it makes it easier to reestablish the position once the funding becomes available, whether it's during the year or in a subsequent year.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. I don't have another question at this time. Thank you.
Committee Member Frost?
Yes, my question is probably for City Manager Towery, but when we're looking at the reductions, and what I heard from Chief Wood is that about $1 million is coming from the police department of the $3 million reduction. So that's about 1/3 of the reduction. Is that equivalent to the overall budget for the police department in relation to the rest of the budget for the city?
I think I can show you that document in the financial overview. Let me flip to it. I think that the police department makes up
It's on page 34 in the electronic packet.
30, yeah, let's see.
It's probably 4 pages earlier in the other one. But according to that, the police budget is 38% of the general fund, looked at one way. And then another way of looking at it is 30.7%, and I think that was related to the staffing.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yes, yeah, expensed, by expense, it's 38, police department is 38% of the general fund.
Mayor Morris?
Chief Wood, do you know how our staffing compares to City of Newburgh, for example?
I believe the most recent staffing data I saw for the city of Newburgh, their total authorized staffing was around 35 sworn. I also believe they're a smaller overall population than the city of McMinnville, but the difference is eluding me at the moment. I can't come up with a number difference, but I think it's roughly 8,000 or 9,000 people difference in population.
Right. And are they fully staffed? I believe they are.
I'm unsure.
Not sure.
I'm not sure that's accurate, because Newburgh covers Dundee as well.
And that's a great point. I'm not sure what the population of Dundee does to their overall coverage, population, how many people.
Yeah, so Newburgh and Dundee are about 29,000. And so if their staffing level is 35 and our staffing level is 53, our population's about 35,000.
Our total sworn staffing is only 43.
Got it. Comparable.
I had a question about best practices. You mentioned that on a shift, sometimes there's only 4 sworn officers and a sergeant, I believe. Is there kind of a standard for best practices?
It's difficult to establish like a best practice standard for every law enforcement agency across the country, because it takes more people to police Newark, New Jersey, because Newark, New Jersey has a different crime rate than, say, Salt Lake City, Utah does. Maybe they have similar populations, but the overall crime rates for those are very different. So when you see sometimes calculations, historically the staffing per 100,000 population was a very popular way to measure the number of police officers you had to cover certain areas. While that is a measure, right, I think you also need to account for what the overall crime rate of those locations are. So there is not a universal standard, but best practice is to look at your overall calls for service and what it would take to reach a point of saturation, so that what that tells you is, how many calls can I take in a certain period of time before I can't take any more calls and everybody's tied up, and then we have that next call come in or that next thing happen where one of our officers calls for cover, like Counselor Tukalski talked about, and then they have to wait. So here in McMinnville, it would take say we had 3 officers on duty, it would take about 5 calls to come in 1 hour, and we would be pretty close to the point of saturation.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to verify, or maybe just get some of the data that I read in the packet kind of out on the record in this area. So this is also from page 34 in the electronic one. I'm not sure what it is in the regular one. Let me find it. But I'll just go forward with my question. So it looked to me like on that page, it suggested that as a percentage of the total general fund by department, the reductions to PD is about 1.44%, whereas the overall cuts to departments across citywide is 10%. Is that accurate, what I'm reading there?
That, I think it is, and that's one of the things that sort of skews the numbers, is that PD carried all those vacancies last year, and so they spent less by a substantial amount, and so while Cord's requests were reduced by $1 million, the fact that
He had more vacancies.
his vacancies, and we actually didn't fund some of the vacancies last year just because there wasn't an expectation that we'd be able to fill them. So that kind of skews that percentage reduction number.
He started a little leaner.
Right,
is what you're saying.
right. He already had vacancies and didn't necessarily have all the money to fill them, partly because we didn't expect we could fill that many vacancies in a year.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you. And then, no, I'll just drop that. Thank you very much.
Chair Maxfield, I have one quick question.
I just wanted to let everyone know, we're going to take a break at 8, so we'll keep going, but if you're losing steam, just half an hour more.
This is super fast. Just
Okay.
How many sworn officers were for Newburgh Dundee?
Can you speak? I couldn't quite understand.
Yeah, how many sworn officers did you say there are for Newburgh Dundee?
I believe the last data I saw, it was 35.
35, okay.
I'm sorry?
And we have 43.
Current authorized sworn police officer positions from the chief of police through patrol is 43.
Committee member Bolden.
I know you feel like you're probably getting hit with everything. First of all, growing up here, I want you to know I really appreciate all y'all do for our community. And I'm sorry we have to be faced with these decisions. That's very important. I do have a question, but I'm not sure if it's to you directly or to you, Jeff. The first question is, we talked about overtime, and I know you're looking into that. I was curious if y'all track amount of overtime for going to court versus the amount of overtime for being on the road. oftentimes I know that we as citizens forget that it takes officers and deputies, they have to write reports, they have to go to court, they have to spend time in jail booking people, and so I was just curious if you do track those separately.
We try to track different categories of overtime. So yes, so being ordered into work or backfilling a shift, court minimums. We have a CBA that designates when you get called into court on your day off that we pay a certain number of hours of overtime for that. Shift continuation. How many hours did you work beyond the end of your shift? So yeah, there's multiple different categories that we look at when we authorize overtime for people.
Is that information that's available to know? The reason I'm asking that question is from my past experience, I know that it can be an equivalent of multitudes of FTE if you actually look at the amount of time you get called to court, whether you get to and get recalled back because you weren't called to testify in that time. So an officer may be called on Tuesday but didn't get to testify, has to come back on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and then you're stuck short. So I was just curious if that amount of hours is available.
I would say a qualified yes, and I would qualify that with that I've been here 4 months, and
yeah.
my ability to pull some of that data out of the system is still a little rudimentary. So I would say a qualified yes. We could probably figure out how many hours of what category of overtime we had spent for a particular period of time.
And then my second question, and I think this is probably going to be somewhere else, but obviously you probably know in 4 months this answer, but has there been an increase in your workers' comp liability due to any issues related to accidents or harm? You're speaking to less officers on the road. I'm assuming that there is still contact between officers, unfortunately, and the people that they have to deal with that can cause injury. And I was just curious if with the officer to person ratio, if the workman's comp, particularly in this area, has increased.
We actually haven't seen that. I'll just let you know that the city attorney and I met with our agent of record earlier this week, and we got all of the reports. He's preparing to share that in a stewardship report to the council in June, but we can get that information and share it out to the budget committee. We'll get that into your packet for next week.
Officer, excuse me, Counselor Tukolsky.
Thank you. So based on my experience within the department, I've found that a lot of people that are patrol officers are surprised by the amount of cases they take and the amount of paperwork that they have to do, which actually keeps them away from the street, which is part of the reason you don't see them on the street as much. Do you have any idea? I will just use Newburgh as an example, or if you have experience elsewhere, what is the caseload from McMinnville Police Department versus another police department? What keeps them off the streets?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that question. There are some things that are universal that we do in McMinnville that other places will do in a similar fashion. Criminal arrests and the reports that go with those criminal arrests occur in every jurisdiction, and they take time, right? To account for that would take a full-on staffing study of what we do at McMinnville to account for all the evidence prep time and the administrative time that goes with a lot of the tasks that we do every day. So some of those things will be universal. Some of those things will be much higher frequency in some communities based on the difference in crime rates. If you live and work in a community that has much more violent crime and you're responding to more violent crimes, you should be expecting to write more complicated reports that take you off the street for more time to process evidence, more time to go to court, all of those things. If you live in a community that has less of those types of crimes, then your workload in that fashion will be less. So I don't know that there's a universal way to compare. I don't know, I think you mentioned Newburgh in your question.
I had, yes.
Yeah, I don't know enough about their processes and how they, even though they work in the same county, the internal processes that they work through, their policies, those internal expectations will have a significant influence over that, and I don't know how to answer that question. I've worked with 2 other law enforcement organizations, and those 2 types of policing were very, very different. You know, when I was working with the state police in particular, and, you know, the station commander for the Coos Bay Area Command, sometimes I would have 2 troopers working that were covering all of Coos County and all of western Douglas County. And it wasn't uncommon if you called for cover, if you had to wait for another trooper to wait 45 minutes or more to have somebody come and assist you, unless there was another law enforcement agency available. That's obviously not the case here in McMinnville because we have help much closer to us, but their criminal workload is very different than a McMinnville type law enforcement agency because they have a very different policing mission. So I don't know how to make an apples to apples comparison for you.
Yeah, and I know you're trying to answer the question that wasn't very clear. I guess what I'm stating is that Newburgh is not the county seat. McMinnville is a county seat. We do tend to have a higher crime rate than Newburgh, based off of what I would just use from the community outreach support numbers that we saw, significantly higher.
I guess I don't have enough experience yet to know what the call load for Newburgh Police Department is.
Okay, that's fair.
You know, in the 4 months I've been here, I've been very focused on what is McMinnville Police Department's workload and responsibilities. So I don't know to answer the question, I guess.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Councilor Chenoweth?
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on your sorry, allergies are getting me. I'd like to follow up on your comment about about the insurance that you're going out. Since I've been on council, to my knowledge, we've never bid our insurance to multiple agencies. Is that something that we can do to look at potentially bringing the insurance costs into a more favorable position?
Yes, the workers' comp in particular, there's really not much in the way of options. One of the things our agent of record does is periodically take a look at the market and give us advice about when it's time or when we might have an opportunity to look for insurance. We're much of our insurance is through the CCIS pool. It's difficult to find insurance that's more affordable than that, but there have been times we have looked at the market for specialty insurance, and we get advice from Hagen Hamilton. That actually be a great question for Ryan when he's here in June to talk about kind of when's the right time to go to the market on some of these coverages.
Mayor Morris?
So I know that the police department is in a force at some of our events. Alien Days is coming up. Will any of the cuts affect those areas, being at events or being, with the air show is a big event for us? Will any of this affect that?
So Alien Days, or the air show or any of those other special events, we make a marked effort to make sure that we have the right number of people present to handle those events. It's something that we typically have to do with overtime or extra shifts, but we also have good working relationships with those events, and we get full cost recovery for our people's time when they participate in those events.
Okay.
So there's a personnel capital expense to it because people are working an extra shift, but as far as a financial one, we actually do a pretty good job of getting cost recovery for those.
Okay. And did I see on the screen that the money for the dismantling or the RV towing was taken away or is still in the budget?
So it was reduced. It's not
Reduced.
fully taken away. There are still funds in that line for those services. I'm making a bit of a projection on how many of those I think we will do based on how many we've done in recent history.
So the $40,000 in here is a correct line item?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes?
This is probably for Jeff, and I see Director Hedges has stepped off. Page 65 of the Personnel Services Overview. It's been mentioned once here, but obviously, and I know we can't talk about specifics, but does this budget have any prediction to it whatsoever of what the added cost we might be seeing with the new CBA, and or specifically the last sentence on that page, no COLA adjustment was applied to members of the police bargaining unit as their CBA is active in negotiation?
So, yes, we do have funds in the budget that, oh, wait, Vicky's back. I'll let Vicky talk. Sorry. Go ahead, Vicky.
Thank you, Jeff. Crystal, you could correct me if I'm wrong. When we built the budget, we built in just the standard cost of living increase and have not built in anything further for bargaining. But Crystal, you could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You said it just right.
So to clarify, there is a cost of living increase included in this budget for the sworn officers, but it is not final because the CBA is still being worked through.
That's correct.
Cool, thank you.
Sometimes I can't tell if you're just making eyes at me or if you want to speak. Would you like to speak?
I have a question about something I saw on the court slide, but I didn't know if we're still, can we move to that? I just have a question for that. I think it was Scott that was talking about the court slide. And there was something about 4 employees down to 2.6 FTE and then losing a position. Is the loss of the position reflected in the 2.6 or is the loss of the position after 2.6 bringing us to 1.6?
So the loss of the position is after the 4.
Okay, but
So that was a vacancy that was unfilled.
great. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
I have a question on page 30 of the physical paper. It's talking about the reserves, and it says, it has on the left-hand side our target, and the bottom of the right, it says what we have in the reserves. And it says we are $86,000 above the reserves target. I would just love to know more about that decision.
That's just where the number ended after all the dancing stopped.
Okay.
We didn't.
So it wasn't like you were like, let's go a little bit higher.
There was no conscious decision to nail it at 86,987. Just
Okay.
once all the numbers got in, once we ran all the reports, included all the reductions from the initial requests, that's where the number landed.
So in theory, we could reach our goal and reallocate $86,000.
Correct. The reserve target.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Yes, please.
So I feel like some of the conversation in the community has been a little bit inaccurate. God darn it. I apologize. I will speak better in the microphone. I have been concerned that some of the conversation in the community has been a little bit inaccurate regarding the budget shortfall. Manager Towery expressed in his comments that $1 million of that shortfall is due to us setting aside money for buildings that we haven't done before. in terms of maintenance. And so that's not service level, that is in addition to service level. And I just wanted to kind of call that out because we have not, as a council or as a budget committee, Chief Wood, I think in his comments said that his philosophy is to prioritize people over buildings. And that had been the philosophy of our city for many, many years. And so we have decided in this budget cycle, in a difficult budget cycle, to try to start addressing the deferred maintenance on that building, on those buildings, but that is an expansion of the service level. The second point I just wanted to make, speaking generally, is that we have spent a fair amount of time trying to build up the strategic reserve to the current level. And so we have a $4.67 million strategic reserve. I'm not advocating that we spend that down significantly, but I do want to point out that it is there, and the point of a strategic reserve is when we have difficult times to cushion transitions like the one that we're experiencing. And in past budgets, we have actually dipped into the strategic reserve when we've needed to. And then finally, as the council knows, but maybe the budget committee hasn't discussed it in quite the level of detail that we have on council, there's still probably something like $425,000, I believe, remaining in ARPA, unallocated ARPA funds. So while the overall budget is a challenge, an extreme challenge, it's not as dire as it may at first appear, but I do think that it's really important that we use this budget as an opportunity to set, as Manager Towery said, to set a service level expectation, even if it's lower than what we would prefer now, that is long-term sustainable without having to rely on strategic reserves and doing a lot of the things that we have been doing. So I just wanted to throw those out there, that there are decisions that we've made that added to that $3 million, and that there are other places where we might look for at least softening some of the decisions that we need to make tonight.
Yes?
Chair, thank you, Council President Peralta. Just let me add one more aspect of the reserve, is that our single largest revenue source is property taxes. We don't get those property taxes until October, November, but we incur costs before then. Our substantial costs in the general fund are payroll, and so we have to make payroll. One of the reasons to have a strategic reserve is for cash flow purposes, so we don't have to do short-term borrowing to make up our expenses. So it's not just for lean times, but also helps us with cash flow.
I have a question about the ARPA dollars. There isn't a line item that says available ARPA dollars. They're all, ARPA's written by a number of the line items. So how do we tell if it's something that we've already started to buy or started to work on, so we can't reallocate it, sorry.
Got it. So there's another fund involved. So that's actually part of the conversation that we'll have next week, but I'll foreshadow for you. The ARPA funds that you see in the general fund are projects that have been approved, started, and that we're spending the money. The unallocated and unspent ARPA dollars are actually in Fund 5, and you can see how much is allocated and how much is already attached to specific projects and how much is yet to be allocated. And again, it's around $500,000, I think, is the total. So, but that's in a separate fund.
Manager Towery, can I add to that?
Yes.
Crystal's going to fix what I just said.
So on page 333, there's a designated ending fund balance for general fund committed. 818,000 is sitting there. That's what is left in ARPA funds that are not budgeted for yet. Doesn't mean that the project budgets are not already committed, but that just shows what is still to be budgeted by the end of fiscal year 26. There's about 512,000 of ARPA funds that have not been project allocated.
Was that page 333 of the PDF or the booklet?
333 in the PDF. 337 on the electronic.
57, yeah.
What is it?
337.
I've heard 4 different numbers now.
337 in the electronic version. And it's the designated any fund balance committed.
That 9901-07?
9901-90.
90, thank you.
No.
So
Counselor Chenoweth.
Thank you. So one thing is the council had made the decision that we wanted to not allocate any of that money until the projects that we have already allocated completed, so that if there was any cost overruns, we had the money to cover that cost overrun. That's not to say we couldn't, but just to say that's the reason why we have an excess, is we wanted to make sure that we didn't end up caught in a situation where we had to come up with extra funds to finish a project. Second, I did want to ask a question. This is probably going to go to Crystal, I suspect. And I'm going to read the question because I didn't send these questions because I didn't send them. So, but I'm going to read it and then hopefully it makes sense. On page 30, it shows a contingency of 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this gets you're going to be flipping through pages, but so probably listen to the question without flipping through the pages, and then we'll go from there. Yet Fund 1 shows 1.5 million contingency, Fund 5, 25K, Fund 10, 1.5K, Fund 15, 50K, Fund 20, 500K, Fund 25, 300K, Fund 70, 200K, Fund 75, 900K, Fund 77, 2.5 million, Fund 80, 75K, and Fund 85 has 150K. When I total all that up together, I get 6.2 million in contingency. What am I doing wrong?
Some of those funds are based on projects, so it's project contingent in some of those funds. So in the general fund, for example, it's funded primarily property taxes, so it's the best.
A lot of the funds are departments. I'll go back through them between now and Tuesday and see which ones are actual projects. But a lot of those, the 1.5 is general, correct. But then you've got contingencies in a lot of the departments that exist. So when you actually add up the total contingency sitting out there, it's a lot more than the 1.5 million we're saying, and that doesn't even include the 4.7 that we started with. So I'm a little confused on this discrepancy.
So most all of those funds are also dedicated to specific purposes. So the fact, I'm sure that the largest number you read is the wastewater fund. That's only available for wastewater. The contingency in any dedicated fund is only available for that fund. So if you're looking at all funds contingency, sure, we have contingencies oftentimes for capital projects. Some of the operating funds are also dedicated. So yes, and the comparison for that $6.1 million is the total $121 million enterprise budget, not the $36 million general fund.
The answer to my question would be 1.5 million is our contingency general, but there is another existent out there, 4.7 contingencies that exist that perhaps might be tied to a project, more than likely are tied to projects.
Projects and/or some of those funds are operational and they have their own contingencies. For instance, the building fund carries a contingency. Those funds are dedicated to the building program only.
Almost every fund has a contingency. Debt service doesn't, because we know the debt schedules. But almost every fund has a contingency.
Do you have another question, Counselor? Okay. Well, we have time, so great.
You have 18 more hours, Chris.
Feels like to your point, Sal, that when I look at all this extra money, if I can put it that way, that's sitting there, that things aren't quite as dire as the pill that I was swallowing a few months ago or a month ago when this first got notified. And so I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding things correctly, because I don't want to misrepresent what I see. But what I see is an awful lot of extra money sitting on the table, whether they're tied to a specific department or not. That's still extra money sitting on the table. And so I just, it's still there.
It's money for those funds that have dedicated purposes, and but for services that the general fund might provide to those other funds, we can't access that. We can't access the Fund 77, is that wastewater capital? Yeah. The biggest number has to be wastewater capital, in my mind. It may not, but for instance, street capital is dedicated to street improvements. We can't get access to that for general fund dollars. The general fund is really important to our outwardly facing services, but it excuse me, it doesn't get access to those dedicated funds who have their own contingencies.
Yes, 77 is wastewater capital.
Yeah.
And the way I did this was by just searching for contingency, right? That's a fast way to go through and find this stuff. So I didn't connect this to necessarily what the funds were.
Got it. Thanks.
I know that there's several questions and there's a line, but I think we're going to take a break because I feel like people are getting antsy. So write them down and we will come back. We're going to take a 10-minute break, but I will start at 8:10. Oh, I don't have my gas.
Recording.
So am I reading this?
Recording in progress.
Here's our expenses, and we're still spending more than we're taking.
I mean, that's what that says, but I don't know if it means what we think it means.
I'm going to ask that question.
I think you should.
I think that's kind of.
Yeah, you definitely need to ask the question.
There is, it's kind of, I don't see it in, there's no like actual. Oh, yeah, that's stuff that you'd have to like, because I'm sure that they're different for you. Like, kind of all of them have this like vehicle replacement. Because we did the county. Yeah. We had like, they said how many miles. I assume that there's some that are patrol cars.
About the first section.
Yeah, they're pulling weight or towing. No, they don't, it doesn't. Just get that detail. Does not.
Oh. I think Kim,
So not line by line, but like section.
Thank you.
I do know there's like 4 questions.
Kim,
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think some of that may be due to expenses that have not yet been beginning balances.
It is 8:10.
Well, no, it's not that.
8:10.
I'll ask the question.
Yeah, we should find out.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
We are meeting tomorrow morning still.
Are we? Good.
Yeah. I want to.
Yeah, we should. There's plenty to talk about.
You don't want to.
Always plenty.
There's things.
The world just keeps on turning, doesn't it, Kim?
Happy to have you, though.
Okay. I am so happy to see you all so lively, but I'm going to mute myself. I am going to stop that, and we're going to come back. Welcome. I believe, so Councilor Geary no longer has a question, but it was Councilor Tukulski and then Mayor Morris. Sorry, did you want to go to the mayor first?
I'm great, yeah.
Okay.
I'm good.
Oh, you don't have a question?
Not any longer.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Okay. Mayor?
So Jeff, I have a question for you on page 30 of real paper. I just want to clarify how to make sure I'm reading this, because is total revenues 30,658,000 and total expenses 31. So am I reading that we're spending more than we're taking in, or am I missing something?
That's correct. We're still not quite to the point where annual expenses and annual revenues are matching up. There's a couple of exceptions. The capital outlay, so if you look at what we tried to do is get closer to the operating costs, which are the personal services and the materials and services, matching up with the total revenues. But debt service and transfers out are also significant numbers as expenses, and so those numbers are closer than they historically are, but not quite there yet.
So even if we accept the proposed budget, in my mind, we still need to I would find $756,000 to have a balanced budget.
Part of what we're spending, though, some of the project work, ARPA, for instance, or project funds that came from grants, if those things carry over, they no longer show up in that total revenue number, they show up down below.
Okay, so we have, but they show up in expenses?
Yeah, so maybe we realized the revenue already, but carried it over, and so it now shows up as some part of, like, the committed beginning fund balance, for instance. There's $2.2 million in ARPA below the line on the revenue.
So maybe really looking at the 37 is more of an accurate thing to look at? 37,957. Total resources.
Yes, I mean, we've gotten a lot closer. Crystal, do we have the graph that shows the lines for revenue expense? Can you tell me which page that's on?
31, 50, 54.
So one-time expenses are not removed from the current expenses, so you would almost, in a way, have to remove the capital outlay, 521,000. In there is some of those ARPA projects, which are not coming in as new current revenue. So that's where this is a little bit skewed, because the one-time costs of carryover money, like Jeff was saying, are not excluded out of expenses.
Let's give us we can try to refine that number a little bit from this sort of big page here to get closer to answer that question for you.
Perfect.
So we're gonna shift gears a little bit because the whole first hour of Q&A, we bounced around. I think we're gonna start to work through the binder a little bit. So if anyone has questions about the financial overview, let me know. We'll do that and we'll kind of work through and see if that helps us, because it's been a little bit scattered except for the dedicated questions for Chief Wood. So does anyone have any questions from the financial overview? The pages? Tabs. Paper pages 17 is the first one.
Chair Maxfield?
Yes.
I did have one remaining question.
Oh, sorry, I apologize.
No, it's okay. I said otherwise, but Councilor Geary's comment made me rethink that. So, if I may.
Yes, please.
So, Manager Tower, you had said that the wastewater funds, as an example, I think it was account number 90, it's not transferable funding. That's correct, yes?
So we can't use it for general fund. It can be loaned out, which we have done, in fact, so.
That's where my question comes in. We loaned ourselves money.
Yes, and then we pay it back. So
we haven't paid anything back yet that I know of. If I could finish my question.
Sure.
The funds to buy the RVO rubber property came out of a different fund that we borrowed from, correct?
The city borrowed money from the wastewater for the Northwest RV site, yes.
Okay, so earlier, I believe I heard you say that we can't do that.
No, you can't spend those dedicated funds for operations, but you can loan cash reserves between funds, which we do.
Okay, that clears my question. Thank you.
Can I just clarify that the Urban Renewal District agency didn't, or the city did and gave it?
So wastewater loaned the money to the city to buy the property, and Urban Renewal will pay back wastewater. So you can borrow funds. We do interfund loans.
Sure.
You can borrow funds for capital, which that has been our practice. We have not borrowed funds for operations, because borrowed funds for operations you just have to pay back the next year, but you have 5 years to pay back an interfund loan for capital. So when you look at the transfers out, the debt service in the general fund, some of those debt payments are for previous loans from wastewater, for instance. So we're transferring out of the general fund to wastewater to pay back some of those debts, and we do it over a 5-year schedule. So we've
maybe
I think borrowed 3 years in a row from wastewater.
Maybe I missed that part of it. How do we plan to pay that back?
We budget it in the general fund. So there's a debt service transfer out.
Which page is that?
Crystal, it's in non-departmental. It's under the non-departmental tab. So go there first.
And does that also include if we give away the land that we're still capable?
We're not giving away any land, so that's a moot question.
No, I'm saying if we did.
What was that?
Per our previous meeting, we had talked about giving the land to the developer. Does that also include being able to pay it back if we're giving that land?
No, wastewater is going to pay back. Wastewater is going to get money back whether we sell the land, whatever we sell the land for, whether it's $0 million or $10 million. wastewater has to pay that, wastewater has to get paid back by urban.
And it'll come out of the general fund?
Urban renewal will.
Urban renewal, thank you. Okay, that answers my question. If you could just point to the page number.
Yes. So if you go to the non-departmental tab in the budget, and
Paper page 332,
thank you, 332 in your,
account 9701-77, which is transfers out, interfund debt, wastewater capital. In the detail there, the second one down,
Okay, that's what I couldn't find that. Thank you. That makes sense.
Counselor Chenoweth.
Thank you. So on, I think this is in the general page. I don't have the general page in front of me, so I'm going from memory on where it is, and if I'm wrong, sorry. The contingency in this budget is 4.7. My memory is not always accurate, but it was 3.5 last year. Is that correct?
Which fund are you talking about? Which contingency?
I'm talking about reserve dollars that we set aside for the budget. We're budgeting this year for our reserve 4.7, and I believe last year it was somewhere around 3.5, if my memory serves me correctly.
so the unappropriated ending fund balance was 4.6.
What did we budget at the beginning? My memory is it was 3.5.
We may have, yes, we may have budgeted 3.5. We'd have to look at a different report to see what we budgeted last year.
I'd be curious, because that would be another 1.2 that we're pulling this time around that we didn't pull last time around.
Well, I can tell you we had more vacancy savings last year than we were assuming for the.
Sure, but we're starting out, if you start out with a contingency of 3.5 last year, and you start out with a contingency of 4.7, you're banking 1.2 right off the bat, that you didn't bank the year before.
Right.
And that's part of where the 3 million comes from.
Right.
so there's a couple places you could look. Paper page 332. In the 2025 amended budget, contingency 1.9 in general fund, plus the unappropriated on the very next page, 424,000. So the math there,
I did not hear the beginning because I was off in my own thoughts, sorry.
on paper page 332, there's contingency in the column of 2025 amended budget. So the general fund contingency was 1.9 million. So you'd take that plus your unappropriated ending fund balance. And then to see what the general fund beginning balance rolled into, that's on paper page 83. So with some of the current changes, the general fund beginning fund balance started at 4.9.
I got a mouthful now. I'm just trying to compare the reserve as we agreed to in the last budget to the reserve that we're asking for in this budget.
Yes, please.
So just to answer Counselor Chenoweth's question.
Mike, please.
Dang it. Just to answer Counselor Chenoweth's question, last year's budget on page 38 said that our goal was a 1.5 month operating budget, and the reserve target was 3.090992. So it's 800,000.
And that dollar amount changes every year with the size of the fund. So if the fund is larger, 2 months of operating expense is larger. If the fund is smaller, 2 months is smaller proportionally.
Right, but it was 1.5 was the target last year.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions from the financial? Yes.
So, to get, the financial overview, specifically page 39 in the paper, general fund deferred maintenance capital investments. This one, I just want to completely understand that this is deferred maintenance and capital investments that were from previous years that at least on this one, this is now included in this balanced budget, so it is no longer delayed, correct?
So the projects that are listed on page 39 are intended to be funded in the proposed budget. That's correct.
Okay, all right. But then everything on page 40 is projects that are still out there waiting for us to fund them.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, now, if we're done with that section, we're going to look for questions related to personnel services. Starts on page 64.
Chair Maxfield?
Yes.
I just would like to follow up on Councilor Chenoweth's point before we move on. So, just doing rough math, if we were to seek the same strategic reserve that we adopted in 2023-24 of 3.1 million, and that's 1.5 months instead of 2, then the number is 3.4775 million instead of 4.7 million. So that's about 1.2 million if we were to choose to do a 1.5-month reserve instead of a 2-month reserve. And I think that was the point you were making. And
Well, not exactly, but I'll take it. I think more the point that I was trying to make was along the lines of an ancillary thought that you had, which is that this budget is not as bad as we first thought it was. That there are some things that were done in it, not to disparage, but there were some things done in it for whatever reasons, going from 1.5 months to 2 months. That took money out that otherwise would have been available had they gone with the same numbers that we used the year before. And I think that helps us to understand where we're at. I'm not necessarily saying we should go to 1.5. I'm just saying it helps us really understand the picture in terms of going forward. Are we going to expect, I mean, one of the things I'm thinking is, am I going to come back here next year and we're going to be $3 million in the hole again? Right? I mean, I don't want to, this is, I've been voting no to increase revenue for 4 years. We've increased $6 million in revenue, and we're $3 million in the hole based on what we were told. I don't want this to keep happening.
well, I mean, sorry, and I apologize for the back and forth.
It's fine.
Okay, so, and so I think you're correct. I mean, because essentially of the shortfall that we're talking about, 1.2 million of that shortfall is related to an increase in the service level of our strategic reserve. And then $1 million is reduced to an increase in the service level of our dealing with our deferred maintenance. So that's 2.2 million of the $3 million shortfall that we're talking about. So those are choices that we have the opportunity to make decisions about as a policy board, but this is part of the reason why, and I appreciate your teasing this out a bit, again, why I kind of made the point that I think that it's been a little bit incautious in terms of how we've spoken about this $3 million deficit.
Councilor Cunningham?
Yeah, specifically, I want to call out a couple things that I'm concerned in the financial overview. Page 52, this is going to be under core services needs, and I'm just going to kind of lump them together and wait for Scott to tell me that I am wrong. So 34, 35, and 36 in that. I'm wondering if specifically 36, the open data application that speaks about being able to really create those dashboards for people to really easily understand. In the time that I've been on city council, and it seems like that's one of the dashboards we've really called out as wanting to see, is that folks in the public can really drill down into our finances. And is that what we've been talking about, Scott, or is that a different module?
I think it's related to that module. It's a different piece of software, as I understand it. I believe this was put in here by, I don't know if Katie or Jennifer put this in here. This is from last year. Last year. Yeah, it kind of carried over from the year before as an unmet need. So we'd probably have to evaluate it again against the software we bought before we decided to fund it. Because just reading about it, it does do some of the same things about transparency work. And so I wouldn't necessarily go out and fund this particular piece of software until we've figured out the one that we have. So
Okay, so this isn't this isn't the transparency drilling
this is
down
a
that
different
our now software has. This is something totally different.
Correct.
Okay,
Different
great.
project.
All right, great.
The other thing I would add is that there's nothing new. This is the same list that was in last year's budget, just to show you what those needs are. The decision to purchase the new financial software package may, in fact, have checked a number of things off of this list. We just had this as a background piece for you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Jeff, earlier in the meeting tonight, you mentioned that that part of the reason for maintaining a reserve or a contingency is to make sure that we have sufficient cash flow to handle operations. 2 months is more than we've had previously, so thank you for trying to hit that number, which was a council direction. Prior to us having that current 2 months, how often have we had to do short-term loans or that type of thing in order to deal with cash flow internally?
I don't actually think we've had to do that. I think we've been able to manage our cash flow without those short-term borrowings. I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that the prudent person reserve was not just there for difficult times, that it serves another purpose as well. But we have avoided those short-term borrowings in my experience here.
Thank you.
Unless Crystal's jumping up and down behind me right now.
No, that's accurate.
Yes.
I'm just curious, are we in personnel now?
You can go to personnel. I guess we're going to go slowly forward, but we can always go back.
I just want to jump ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just curious in the personnel report, and maybe I just missed it when I was going through it, but is there somewhere that I see the unfunded positions, but is it somewhere directly in the report that talks about unfilled that I'm missing? Does that make sense?
Vacancies?
Yeah, so this report shows you the positions that are funded, but is not a reflection of how many vacancies we might have at a given time.
So
If you have a question about vacancies, Vicki Hedges is on the screen and she can answer it. But this is not the document that shows you what our current vacancies are or what vacancies we might forecast during the course of the year.
Okay, and so just to follow up with that question, so if I wanted, just for understanding purposes, like we were talking about the police department, the positions that they're cutting aren't necessarily filled at this time, would that be the same process in each of the departments? I mean, is that how we should be looking at it? Then there's not like, according to what you just said, there's not like a set 50 of the positions that we show in the budget are currently vacant, right? Am I saying that correctly?
I think so. The budget includes the money to fill the positions that are authorized to be filled. Some of those positions are vacant now, and we're working to fill them, and some will come vacant in the future, and we will also work to fill them. But Vicki can talk a little bit about our vacancy history.
Hi, Vicki.
Hi. I'm not so sure I understand the question. We do have the vacancies that especially Chief Wood referred to earlier. We've been working on those. We're working to fill Susan Mears' position. The code compliance position is vacant. Some of the department directors have talked about those positions that are being eliminated but are vacant currently. So I don't know if there's more specific questions, but that's what I could add for what I think you were asking.
I guess to follow up to that, what I was wondering is, in the reduction of the budget, how many bodies of currently employed staff are not going to have a job, and how many people are not currently employed, but their funding is in the budget?
I can't tell you how many vacancies we have right now that we intend to fill. I can tell you that of the 11.6 FTE that were reduced, one of those was a layoff. The equivalent of about 1.5 were reductions in hours for several people. And then half an FTE is not yet vacant, but will be due to a retirement at the end of the calendar year. Does that help?
Yeah, I just visually, I mean, they're our community people as well, is what I find, so.
Right.
You heard it one place, you heard it somewhere else.
Right.
So of the 11.6, 9 of those are vacant or happening due to retirement.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to the next section.
Oh.
Nope, we're not. Yes.
You have a question.
I had this come up somewhere along the line. This is for Vicky. Last year, I had some conversations in regards to burnout, and you did some research for me, and we talked a little bit about it at one of the meetings. In the last year, and especially coming up over the last month when everybody in town is talking about the city budget, have you seen another layer of good or bad from staffing?
Oh, I think anytime that, you have to face budget cuts, it's not good for morale. So I think this has had an impact on the morale of the city. And there are definitely conversations about what this means for our employees, and there's a lot of feels like unknowns, and so that's going to create angst amongst the staff. So I don't know that I've necessarily seen anybody leave yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the result of these kinds of conversations. They're difficult.
In addition to that, we talked to the new chief of police, and he had a constant number of unfilled positions. But in the back of my brain, what is the revolving door? How many people have gone out and how many people have gone in the last year that kept that open vacancy number at 6?
I don't have an exact number for you, but I could look that up. And I will say some have left on their own, and some have left because they, left during probation, those kinds of things. So it's not necessarily a direct impact of budget cuts or recruitment, but there are different reasons why people have left, including retirement, which I didn't mention in there.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm more interested in looking at the revolving door from a perspective of training and staffing setup, because we know that a revolving door creates more expense and more headache for personnel as well as departments. Are you seeing a continuation of that?
Yeah, I think the general number that someone says when you onboard a new employee, it costs about 1.5 of their salary. So their annual salary, it costs about 1.5 to recruit, train, and onboard a new employee. That number goes up significantly for our police department because they have such a training process and they have the academy that they have to attend. So that number is, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but exponentially higher than any other position.
Let's take a look at that for next week. What the flow has been on staffing, how many people have left, and how many people you've hired. And if you could do a couple of years of data for that, that would be fantastic, because that does go into the play of what do we do for our people? And we're looking at cutting. Well, is that going to cut our nose off? Or are we better to look at that 1.5 million that's going into the reserves and some other things that we can plow money back into personnel? I think
Happy
that's
to pull some numbers together for you.
that'd be fantastic. Thanks, Vicki.
Uh-huh.
All right, questions about the next section? General beginning fund balance. It starts on 81 in the physical. I'm just going to move also to general administration, and if someone wants to go back, they can, because I don't want to spend too long. Oh, yes, Mayor Morris.
General administration questions. So I was looking and I know these are small dollars, but I think all dollars matter. So it looks like last year we were funding 1 Rotarian, and this year we have 4 Rotarians. Do we have 4 people in the city that are part of Rotary?
Sure. I don't keep track of them all.
No, that's Jeff's membership to Rotary Club, and it's charged on a quarterly basis. So that's why it's 4.
4 payments.
4 payments. Okay, then now I'm with you. I know there's at least a couple more Rotarians, but I don't.
I'm like, do we really need 4?
You can only go in January.
I have one more question.
Okay, yes.
And it does. And can you just tell me what Eco Solutions Consulting does for Eco Solutions? What do they do?
That's the consultant we're using for the recology rate review.
39,000. So that's for this year. How much did we pay him last year? The 31? So was his bill 62? Or
What page are we on?
Yeah, help me with the page.
92.
We have to take another look at that because I think we're spending most of that money in the current fiscal year. I think that may be the whole project number, so that may have been an error.
Okay, if you could bring that back next week, that would be great.
Oh, here it is.
You found it?
And just in general, I'm just going to make a comment as to how deep we looked at travel and education in all our departments. And if we looked at that as a place to save, I mean, we're talking $8,000 in you are the department, city manager.
Right.
$8,000 in travel and education. So did we look at those funds throughout each one of these departments?
Yes,
as
everybody
where we
looked
could
at
cut it
and
some?
each department made some different judgments about where to make reductions.
I forget which department it was, but there was a significant reduction further down the road in the travel specifically.
I know
I can tell you, Kim, I totaled up. I did the same thing I did wrongly with the other fund. And just on travel and education, I just hit them all and then totaled it. And the current budget is $213,635 for travel and budget. And that's for all departments total.
Right, we can move to the next department, or the next section, general finance. It's page 108.
Chair Maxfield, could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
We're moving on from Councilor Chenoweth's question or statement, but is there a time where we can say that, or is this the time where we would ask if we could go to basically like a zero-based budget of if you need to travel, you ask for travel, rather than just proposing that you have X amount of dollars to spend?
Yes, this is absolutely the time. Can you explain more clearly what you're hoping to see?
Yeah, I'll be very clear. I don't think there should be any travel in anybody's budget.
Is travel and education though, right?
Go ahead and, yeah, sure, we'll expand on it.
Okay.
So from that point, if you have something that you want to fund and you can go ahead and advocate for that, I would support that. But just giving people dollars outright that they're going to spend without advocating for them hasn't served me well in the past in my private sector life. That's my experience. So that's my proposal.
Could I jump in and just offer a little bit of perspective on travel and education?
Yes.
So travel and education covers, obviously, travel and education, but this includes licenses for our professionals. So this includes things like for engineering, our city attorney, professional certifications that we have to have for our positions. It also includes travel for training. So we have a lot of, for example, software that we use, and it includes trainings for those kinds of software so that we can maintain our knowledge and efficiency and continue to be as efficient as we can as staff. So I understand the thought behind it, but there are legitimate reasons why it would actually cause problems for us if we weren't able to maintain those certifications and licenses.
Right, and I understand that, but you could maintain those licenses and certifications the same way others do if you are going to advocate for yourself because you need PDUs or you need continuing education credits, or if you need to travel in order to maintain your educational certifications for like a PE if they need to go somewhere. All I'm saying is that if we allocate X amount of dollars to begin with, we don't have people that are advocating for themselves, they're just spending the money that we've given them. And it may equal out to the same value in the end, but at least we know that we started with 0 and went up to whatever was required.
So the problem is if we don't budget the money, we can't spend it. So we would put ourselves in a position where, I mean, we already do justify, I mean, we don't spend down every training dollar every year.
I hope you know I wasn't suggesting.
No, I understand what you're saying, but the way the way Oregon budget law works, if we don't budget the money at all, we can't spend it, or we have to take it from someplace else that we have budgeted. So while we budget it, we appropriate by materials and services. If we don't put any money into travel and education, but we allow people to advocate and make decisions to go to travel and education, we have to take that money from somewhere else.
Have they preemptively advocated for themselves, or are we just allocating dollars based off of history?
It's a variety of things. For positions that have to maintain licenses and certifications, there's typically an annual cost, and we continue to budget that and spend it out as needed. There are often times where we may know in advance of an opportunity for a conference, and we will budget for a specific conference. Sometimes there are multiple conferences or training opportunities that may come up, but there's a limited amount of budget. So you have to, which one is going to be best suited? So I guess it's not, it's not a vending machine. We don't just push a button and allow people to go to travel and training without permission and oversight. I see Heather has her hand up. So.
Yeah, there are 2 comments on Zoom.
Yeah, I thought I could share how I go through budgeting for travel and education to help Counselor Chachowski, but we look at what next year's educational needs are for our licensed professionals. So our planners have AICP licensing, and our building team has certifications that they need to maintain as well. And we look at what the opportunities are for next year, where they're located. We talk about what people need, and then we start putting our numbers together for travel and education budgets.
Okay, so it sounds like you've done what I've proposed, but I don't know that everyone's done that. But we also don't need to get into that here. because that
Dan, I've done a little bit of digging on this throughout the city because this has also been just a question of mine on how we do professional development for our employees. And I feel pretty confident in saying that every department is very diligent about this, and they aren't just budgeting training or just allowing somebody to go to training every single year automatically. They're doing a deep dive into this and being very intentional about their training.
Counselor Tukolsky, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Counselor Chenoweth?
I just want to say, you know, I got a number that we were 3 million in the hole. So the reason I calculated that number is if I'm going to start pitching stuff out the window, I'm going to start pitching stuff off that is the low-hanging fruit, right? And so travel and education, while needed, particularly for our professionals, would be the easiest one to say, are we really getting more than we should? You know, when I look at International City Council Management Association and Oregon City Council, County Management Association, do we really need to be in the international one? You know, those types of questions were part of what I was going through as I was looking at this, because I'm looking at a huge deficit, and we're going to need to start picking wherever we can pick. So just for explanation of why I calculated all that.
Thank you.
Yes, Committee Member Frost?
I would just share that at the school district, we look at the same thing. This is also a category that we are looking at very carefully. And for our budget, because we are also looking at a $3 million deficit, we have said our administrators are not traveling anywhere next year. So it is a valid area that I think public entities do look at. And I did notice on page 123 that the travel and education for the engineering fund went from $3,692 in 2024 to we're budgeting $17,000 for this next year. And I was just wondering why that has increased so much. And as a comparison, the other departments look like they've all gone down in this area, so that one is a significant increase.
So it's engineering's in public works, even though it's in general fund. So that's in my department, and it's a combination of things. We have 2 new engineering positions that are not, one's funded by development fees, one's funded by wastewater. So we had to have an increase in travel and training for those positions to maintain their license and then go to 1 annual conference a year. And then in addition, in Public Works, we're facing some pretty significant retirements coming up. And we've had some pretty significant retirements in the last few years. And so I actively put in budget for leadership training, because that is something that is a very big concern for me and my department, is to make sure that people are getting soft skills, which is not something that's common in the technical fields. We're getting a lot of people that know how to make sure the pipes drain, but don't know how to lead their staff. And so there was a very conscious decision to increase Public Works' training over the next year.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
Well, and to your point, how...
Committee Member Harmon Ferry?
I just thought we were in engineering, so if we were in engineering, I had another question to ask, but if you're...
Sorry, Counselor Chenoweth.
To your point, though, how many of these could we make the conscious choice? Because almost everybody's doing all of their training these days hybrid. So how many of these do we actually need to be traveling for that training as opposed to just doing it hybrid?
We actually do make those kinds of decisions. We provide, there are associations and conferences that are happening hybrid, and we're sending people to hybrid training instead of travel. We are also doing a lot of our own training online now, so training that might have required a travel to a class in Salem or to bring a trainer in, we're able to use our NeoGov to do that training. So the one thing I would suggest is that, particularly in an organization where we are likely to be smaller, the people who remain really need to have the tools they need to do their job. And I think that the notion of just eliminating training and education isn't realistic for an organization as complex as we are. And I also don't think it serves the remaining employees well to not have the tools and the expertise to do their jobs.
I'm not focusing on the education side. I'm focusing on the travel side.
there a follow-up to that? Committee Member Harmon Ferry?
Hi, so if we're in engineering now, I have a question on page 121, Fund 5320. Revenue, I like seeing revenue go up, so that's great. It looks like we're anticipating going from $100,000 in engineering fees to $300,000, which is great. I'm just curious to know, what are those new engineering fees?
Yes, so back in October, the city council adopted new engineering fees. Historically, we were at about a 5% cost recovery on engineering development services. So when people are submitting for right-of-way permits or site development permits or whatnot, engineering's part of the development process as well as planning and building. And so that was a very conscious decision to charge development for development and go closer to 100% cost recovery. We're more like 90% because there's certain things like sidewalk fees for residents. We're not recouping all of our costs on that like we would with a developer.
And the other thing that I'd add is that the proposed year will be the first full year of having that fee schedule in place. And we're also basing those fee estimates on development projects that we're already seeing pop up in the queue.
Yes. Mayor Morris, and then
Just a follow-up question to that. So I think in 2024, you predicted that the cost recovery was going to be income of 500,000 from 50,000 to 500,000. But you have in here budgeted 300,000. Fiscal impact, anticipated engineering fee schedule will increase recovery from approximately 50,000 to 500 a year.
Yeah, so we're still in that transition period of some of the projects were already in the planning queue. So there was policy decisions made when those fees were adopted that we weren't going to be charging development projects that are already in process the full engineering fees. So there's a little bit of that, but it should over time keep increasing. And so right now the estimate is even a little conservative on our end. There are some very large developments that are coming in next year that one development on its own is going to be 500,000 in engineering fees. So
that income could go up.
It could definitely go up, yes.
Committee Member Bolden?
I know we jumped to engineering, but I just had a quick.
No, you don't have to explain yourself. Go for it.
I'm on page 96, and as the mayor said, we try to find every little penny, so I just have a quick question. Under the professional services, you talk about it's the $50,500, and I just wondered, is that already committed to do something, or is that just in case? In other words, it's under 7750, and the budget note says intergovernmental contracts, placeholder for participation, incentives, contract services for goal setting and other services. I just wondered if you already had somebody or agreement with somebody, or if that's just, again, like it says, just in case.
Claudia, do we have some of that already scheduled?
No, because our facilitator has a new job.
That's right. So we do a council goal setting every year. That's where that fund comes from. There's some reference to, I'm not sure if we have any of the intergovernmental contracts in place at this point. So the budget note's a little more all-encompassing than just the goal-setting services, but we'll double check. We'll go back to that detail and get back to you next week on that.
Thank you.
Mayor Morris, and then Committee Member Watney.
Okay, so I had a question on the goal setting as well, and the $50,000. I see it was 140 last year. What did we do?
That's not a finalized.
Just curious about that. But intergovernmental contracts, placeholder for participation incentives. So under mayor and city council and participation incentives, what are those?
That was the possibility of considering some sort of remuneration for volunteers. We did never do the work, and so the money's not being spent, and it's not being carried over into next year.
Okay, so the $50,000 is pretty much for the goal setting that's left?
I want to go back and take another look.
Okay.
It's probably close to that.
For what we did in January?
Probably, yeah.
I'd like to look at that then.
I will tell you that when I got here, we were spending more like $90,000 a year on goal setting, so.
That if we had some partners, we could work together. I'm not sure, just personal opinion.
It's up to the council.
Yep. And then I have questions about back. We skipped 94. You go ahead.
Which page were you referencing? Just go ahead.
96.
Committee Member Watney.
General comment, and we touched a little bit on 7750. And I took a look at 7750, kind of like Chris did with his stuff, searching. We spend a lot of money on 7750 and the sub accounts to that. It's too late this year to really do the analysis that I'm going to ask, but over the next year, it should be something that we should take a look at, because right now, we're looking at the bigger picture. And I make my statement every year, I'm not here to find dollars and cents, I'm here to help guide the finance department in the budget process. The one thing that I saw was the high quantity of contract people doing support services for us, that we don't have staff that are fully trained and can be efficient at producing information for us. The bottom line is that's information. We get a piece of paper with a lot of opinions that may or may not help us out. My only comment is for us to take a look at the big picture of all the consultants we use and see if those projects that they're working on will actually come to fruition in reality or real time, and whether or not we should be looking closer at our staffing to give them the certifications that will allow us to internally do things. I think everybody knows I am employee focused and I like to take care of our employees. But at the same time, if we're spending too much money on 7750, we may not be benefiting everybody. Now, am I saying wipe out a bunch of the stuff? No. No. I've used consultants plenty in my history, and there's a place for them. I'd like to be one, but I've decided, nope, I like growing my hair out. So it might be possible that when we take a look at all the departments and all the consultants, we might find that there is a couple of consulting firms that can multitask for us. Maybe not. But over the next year, I think it's something we should take a look at. It's gotten to be an easy place to go when we don't have expertise. And maybe that's when we say, we don't want to do that project at all and move forward with something else. That's all.
So it is 9 o'clock. I think Mayor Morris has a few more questions, and then we'll call it. Do you want to ask them tonight, or do you want to wait?
No, I can.
Okay.
Just going back to page 94, City Hall and city property, I just had a couple questions. So the lighting under repairs and maintenance of the buildings, lighting upgrades, Jeff, can you just tell me, I know we just did some in City Hall, where are these light upgrades going to be?
I'm going to have to ask David Renshaw to answer that question for you.
that's part of what's happening there.
So it's not at City Hall, or when it's city properties, it could be
City Hall is-
anywhere?
City Hall is one of the buildings.
Speaking to the mic so the people over Zoom can hear.
Oh, how about that?
Awesome.
I'm just channeling my inner Sal Peralta.
Okay, and you're probably still up, so just stay right there. So General City Hall, Civic Hall needs $10,000. Can you just give me an idea what we're talking about in that general comment?
You bet. That's one of those line items that it's a little bit difficult to give you a precise number. That's a 1940s building with a 1940s boiler, 1970s air conditioning. So it's basically a number that we can use if we need to make repairs.
Okay.
With our hiring of our facility maintenance coordinator, some of those repairs we can do it with our staff. We're moving towards that model, but we only have one guy to do it. So sometimes we have to rely on contractors to help us out.
Okay, I'm just going to stay on this page and ask my questions. Grounds, so we have $5,000, and that's part of, does that get paid to Public Works, or who does this $5,000 go to for City Hall, Civic Hall grounds?
That's typically for any landscaping that we may contract out, and that's usually like for special pruning, not a lot of that, but some herbicide applications, or if we do landscape restorations, if we're planting new plant material, those sorts of things, new trees.
Okay. And then general city property, this isn't at City Hall, the camp cleanup. Never mind, I don't need you to answer that. I was reading it as specific. And I had the same thing. Under, what's the water and light fiber net?
Probably a better Scott question, to be honest with you.
So the water and light fiber net, I believe, was built in the late 90s. It's a citywide fiber network shared between Water and Light, City McMinnville, and the McMinnville School District. And Water and Light having the facilities and the expertise, we pay them an annual fee for maintenance and upkeep.
Okay.
So we've paid that pretty much for 30 years.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
So I actually have received some feedback that some people have a little bit of extra energy and they don't want to stay later other nights. So I want to do a quick, just, I don't know if it's a straw poll, but just kind of anyone, if you guys want to go another half hour, raise your hand. You feel like you're going strong?
Let's go to midnight.
Go, yeah? Okay, who doesn't want to go another half hour? Some people didn't vote. Okay, I think we're gonna go another half hour, because we've got some people who drank a lot of caffeine, I think. Yes. We can go as late as we want. I don't know. I don't know if,
Let's not get crazy.
okay. Counselor Peralta?
Thank you. To the budget. So, it's sticking with Mayor Morris's questions. Damn it. The Nelson House replace frontage sidewalk includes tree removal, 60,000 in this budget. That seemed a little interesting, given that we have the parks bond that we're considering, and so I thought that the Nelson House, whatever's going to happen there, might get rolled into the demo of the existing community center and so on. So do we really need to spend the 60,000 doing that maintenance this year? Sidewalk and tree removal.
Which page?
Well, okay, so I think that the budget document on the website has slightly different pages than the budget document that he's looking at. But where I see this is page 91 under total materials and services capital outlay,
What's the fund number?
general fund. 1. City Hall and city property. Department 1,
95 is the number.
No, that's not it. It's probably in that area. Oh, shoot. I pulled up two different budgets in that.
Yeah, I think that was a
Cheers.
ARPA project last year, and we
Sorry.
ended up repurposing that to.
I have
way to
two
go,
budgets that I'm
Sal.
comparing side by side. I just got confused. I apologize.
Happens to the best of us.
Moving right along.
It's me all the time.
I do have another question, but go ahead.
Committee Member Bolden.
I just have a quick educational question, because where I came from might have been a little different. If, let's say, in this fund, those dollars aren't expended, does the department get to keep those in their department, or do y'all pull those back and then redistribute allocation?
So typically, if they're project related, they will stay with the department to complete that project in a subsequent year. We don't reduce a budget if money isn't spent, so we'll take a look at what our needs are in a coming year. So anything that's specifically project related, once we spend it, we're done with that project. We may spend an equivalent amount on another project in the next year, but for some of a lot of these project kinds of work, we assess the needs, and we have sort of a stack of projects to work on over several years. Does that help?
Yes. My question, I guess I didn't ask it very clearly or the right way, but if the Sal Peralta wannabe over here wants is it to his department's benefit to not expend, to find the incentive to find the best bang for the buck, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. In other words, if you could, how do I say this better? If, for example, we were just talking about projects that need to get done, and I know there's certain rules on bids and how you have to price out things and so forth. Is it, I guess, what's the incentive for a department to go to the lower, to save money for that department, or so it stays there, not just project related, but as the department as a whole? In other words, if you have a training in Salem or a training in Coos Bay, you like the speaker in Coos Bay, but you could go to Salem, and the savings is greater, does the department get to maintain those dollars, or do they eventually come back to a pool, general government pool or something, and then you disperse them that way?
So any funds that aren't spent just go back, and they become part of that general carryover number at the end of the year.
Thank you. That was.
Okay. Yes.
Flower baskets, at what parking lot? Is that back here? Flower baskets in the parking lot?
We have
$6,700.
flower baskets in multiple parking lots, yes.
So the $6,750 is what we're spending for flower baskets in what parking lots?
Any parking lots that have baskets. So I can't tell you how many there are. David, can you help?
Sure, Your Honor. Specifically, we're talking about the Civic Hall parking lot behind us and a few spots along 3rd Street. That's what those are for. I want to tell you there's 18 baskets, but I'd have to check that number. We buy those from a local nursery. At one point, we actually installed them ourselves. Now, that cost also includes them installing them, just because we don't have the capacity to do that work.
Thank you.
There's also baskets on 2nd Street as well.
That's right.
Okay, we're going to move to the next section, which is,
Community development.
that's it. I thought it was general finance. We already do that?
I thought we finished that.
Oh, we just moved back. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we just ping-ponged around here.
A little bit, yep. Page 125, Community Development Department. Mayor Morris is going to ask a question.
Hey, Heather. I have a question for you. So on community development, you have not funding the code compliance position, but it's just not being funded, but it's not being eliminated, correct?
Yes, I think so. I'm going to defer that to Jeff and Vicky. I submitted it as one of my budget reductions.
Yeah, I don't think we eliminated that position. We just don't have any funding for it this year.
Am I correct, though, that we didn't fund it last year either, and you used those funds to put towards a planner, so you're not really missing a position, because you used that money last year too?
Well, the initial request was to fill that position, and so it's not being filled. We created a new position for planning manager and used the funds from the vacant code compliance position to support that. Was most of the cost, but not all of it. And then Heather's initial budget request was to refill that position, and as it was vacant, as we went through the reduction scenario, it was the funding was eliminated.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it was not used last year and not used this year.
Correct.
Right.
And then what's the title for Jody's title? I'm sorry.
Special Projects Manager.
Thank you. And I thought I heard originally this evening that has been to 0.75?
Yeah, reduced.
Okay, I think in the budget, it's still at 1.
I think that's true. I'll defer that to Crystal and Jeff. That was one that I had submitted as a budget reduction and wasn't captured in the budget numbers, but was captured in the list of budget reductions. And the total amount of our reductions.
Yeah, we can clean that up.
Thank you.
Counselor Geary?
Thank you. I was hoping to go through the, paper page 151, long-range planning, 7750 professional services to the tune of 488, and then in there is just sort of a project compendium list. So wanted to go through there and see if you could talk through each one of those projects and maybe potentially either break down the numbers. Southwest area plan, what's the 235 is comprised of? Is that consultant work, and then the breakdown of consultant work for that effort?
So I think I understand your question. So what I'll try to do is talk about what these funds are for. Mm-hmm. The Southwest Area Plan is a total project of $350,000 for a consultant team to do the work. This project is underway and already contracted, and the 235 is what's estimated to be for next year. And this was a project that we did not get started. It's been carried over 2 years now in the budget because of staffing capacity. We didn't get started back in 2023 when we intended to get started. The consultant team on all of these projects are just, I don't know what committee member had the discussion, but it's expertise that we do not have in our overall planning team. And we also are, we run a planning team at a reduced staffing level, so we don't have the staff capacity to do this type of planning work either. So the one-time expenditure on consultants to get these plans done is to offset what we don't have amongst our team to do it. The natural resources planning, similar to Southwest Area Plan, that's a project that's already contracted and underway. And that is what we expect to be the remainder of the budget for the next fiscal year. I'm going to skip over UGB amendment for a minute. The land use efficiencies, that's also a project that's underway, and this is the financial number that we expect will be carried over into this next fiscal year. That's mandated by the state, and something that we need to get submitted to the state by March of 2026. The 3 Mile Lane Area Plan is contracted and underway, and this is a carryover to the CLG HP grant match. Is a match for a grant that we received for our historic preservation work. You'll see the grant is under 7750-04. And that's actually to look at, that's a new project, and that's contracted now. That's to look at our overall landmark inventory, which is over 1,000 properties, and to revisit them and see which ones actually make sense in terms of being historic landmarks and which ones really shouldn't be on that overall list. And our hope is that by streamlining that list, we will also reduce workload for staff and staff capacity. And then the UGB amendment, that's a requirement of the state. We're in the process of our UGB sequential submittal to the state. This is also one of those things that needs to be in by March of 2026. This is mandated in state law, so we have to get this work done by a certain time period. I'm actually, we're working on the land use efficiencies, and based on that, it will tell us if we need to amend the UGB and how much we need to amend the UGB by. And then the alternatives analysis is the work to look at where we would amend it into and putting together the findings for that. My fingers are crossed that will be less work than what we had anticipated, but I'm not sure. That has not started.
Okay. And then jumping down a little bit further in community development under 775004, I guess paper page 157, professional services grants 448,500, I think, is a couple of projects. The innovation campus at 119,000, the ADA transition plan at 275,000, and the 8212 grant 54. Can you talk me through those projects?
Yeah, so those are all grant funded projects. And the innovation, and they're similar to the other long range planning projects, which is these are consultant teams that we're relying on to help do this work. The innovation campus is underway right now, and this will be the remainder of the work to get that done for next fiscal year, and that will get us all the way to the end of the innovation campus in terms of having an overlay for those properties. This is the 200 acres south of Highway 18 by the hospital. And we're working with the property owners right now on a master plan, and we should have that done, overlay for it, as well as design and development standards. So we'll, and also understand the public infrastructure costs to support that project, those properties developing. That's 100% grant funded, so it's funded with city ARPA funds, and it's also funded with $160,000 from Business Oregon that we received last year. The ADA transition plan is a city ARPA project. That's something that we needed to, as a city, adopt by 2010. So we're outdated. That's a federal mandate. And that's something that is out right now as an RFP, and we hope to get contracted by the end of this fiscal year. And what that does is it looks at all of our public facilities in terms of barriers for accessibility. And so that's the public right-of-way as well as our city structures and facilities. Creates the list of barriers and then creates a game plan to remove those barriers. And without it, we have a lot of liability in terms of DOJ judgment for accessibility. With it, we're saying that we recognize what our barriers are and we have a plan to remove them, and we've established what that plan is. So we can locally say, this is how we're going to address this over this many years. If we don't have it, the DOJ will tell us how we're addressing it. And in Bend, they had a DOJ judgment, and they had to address all their barriers within like some crazy number where they really shifted all their excess funds into doing that over several years. And then lastly, the 8212 grant, that is a state grant that we got. It's been underway for 3 years. This is the final piece of that. This is actually funds to support an internship program at Willamette Valley Medical Center for nursing students.
I'll be doing a full report on that at the next city council meeting, just so you know.
And then, so like ADA transition plan, you said grant funded, and then it says city ARPA. So those are different funds, or the ARPA, it's all ARPA fund, or?
It's all ARPA funds. It's part of the approved list from city council.
So the grant you're referring to is ARPA?
Yes, yes.
And is that the same for the innovation campus? It's all?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so those are part of the list of ARPA projects that City Manager Towery was talking about that have already got allocated dollars to them and aren't representative of the remaining $500,000 that haven't been allocated.
It's not just ARPA, though. It's also another grant that you got for.
Yes, the innovation, so the ADA transition plan is all ARPA dollars, the city ARPA dollars. The Innovation Campus is a combination of 3 different grants.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Heather, does the grant pay for the consultant and our staff time?
Yes, so for these particular ones that you see under economic development, this is where the special projects manager is funded. And so these grants are all paying for the staff time associated with the project management from our staff.
What about the long range ones?
The long range ones do not pay for staff time. So we have 2.5 FTEs of our planning department in our long range planning program.
So I guess right there, I would it kind of goes towards a little bit what Lonnie is saying is a lot of projects with a lot of consultants where it does take staff time, which costs, and where are we at on those? So if we do a 30%, I'm just going to say third straight, 30% plan, and now we're out of grant money, and we don't get a grant to finish it, then we have to go back and do that 30% again. So I guess just maybe how many projects at one time as well do we do that aren't, I mean, we have a lot of plans here, and I think you only said 2 on the page 151 were mandated. The others were all...
The others were directed by city council. So none of the land inside our UGB areas can come into the city until an area plan is adopted for them. So what we did when we responded to the UGB remand back in 2020, and we had a planning horizon that ended in 2023, or we're planning for 20 years. We could have either done the work prior to doing the UGB amendment, which is the area planning work, but we didn't have time because we wouldn't have gotten it submitted in time to the state to meet that planning horizon. So we elected to do that work afterwards and told the state that part of our implementation plan is doing this area planning work. Without the area planning work, that land cannot annex into the city for development. So the city made a commitment, it's in our comprehensive plan policies, to do area planning for that. And the Southwest Area Plan, what we did is we actually combined 2 areas in our UGB planning process into the Southwest Area Plan, so that it's a larger swath of land, but we can get it done quicker and mobilize our consultants and save money that way by putting them together.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just still would just put it out there that there's a lot of things going on at one time, and just looking at payroll that went from 289 and 24, we're at 470,000 was a huge jump. And knowing that staff time is not part of the grants is just a comment that I just want to add to the budget concerns that we have, and how we're serving our local developers when we have so many projects on the books. If they're related at all, it kind of seems like it, but maybe not. So I just want to put that out there as a concern for increase in budget.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When we apply for grants, we try to get as much money as we can. I can tell you all long-range planning grants are not paying for 100% of the project, just the project itself. And so putting staff time onto that, we're not able to do that, but we use staff time as the required match for the grants.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Just on that vein. Before we roll back into the next week, can you reissue the current work plan that you're working off of, the council-approved work plan?
Yeah, I can send that out. I'm actually in Massachusetts right now, so I'll send that out when I get back next week.
Yeah, before we roll in onto the next meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So Heather, I had a quick question for you. When you had your slides at the beginning of the meeting and you talked about the 2 positions that you were going to be reducing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that reducing those two positions would take away up to $3 million that those positions had helped gain from advocating to the legislature. I'm just wondering if those positions are bringing in $3 million. Is that accurate? And if so, why would we reduce a position that's bringing in $3 million?
So one of those positions, the special projects manager, 25% of that position's time was supporting our legislative work. And in the past 3 years that we've been doing the legislative program actively with staff, we've been able to secure $3 million in direct allocations through that legislative work. It's not a guarantee that we'll get it in the future, but as part of the executive team discussion, we had a discussion of eliminating the lobbyist contracts, both our state and federal lobbyist contracts. And those contracts are working in concert with our staff position to get those direct allocations. So it didn't make sense to move that staff position forward in terms of that particular program without the ability to work with a lobbyist who's in Salem every day, able to be the voice for the city to make that program successful.
Thank you for explaining that.
Do you have a comment? Counselor Chenoweth?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it back to that, because that's exactly what I've been wanting to ask a question about. So I assume that before we come back to our next meeting, we're probably going to get a redo on this with some updates and changes to errors that were caught in this budget, so that the numbers are reflective of what actually is being proposed. Because, for instance, the program director, projects director, sorry, it says it's still showing in the budget as a full-time position, even though you're planning on actually dropping that to a three-quarter-time position. So will that be reflected before we come back, so that we see the real actual ending numbers and real actual ending surpluses in front of us? I know it's a little amount, but there's going to be some discussions and horse trading to try to get some things accomplished. And I think knowing the actual excess at the end of this is probably going to be a little helpful.
I'm going to defer that to Jeff and Crystal.
Yeah, we'll have that list.
I just want to acknowledge, Heather, thank you. It's 12:30 your time on the East Coast, so I appreciate you sticking with us and dealing with it during difficult circumstances. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
On that note, I am going to read what I need to read. There being no further business to come before the committee, I will now adjourn the Budget Committee meeting at 9:31 p.m. The budget will reconvene on Wednesday, May 21st at